Hi guys, and welcome to History That Makes You Sleepy. Tonight we step into the pale breath of a winter morning on the 19th century trail, where the world is white. The canvas roof above you crackles with frost, and every small sound seems louder in the cold. You smell wood smoke, wet wool, tired animals, and yesterday's bacon. Your boots sink into crusted snow. Your fingers ache before you finish buttoning your coat. Somewhere beyond the wagon line, an ox snorts into the darkness, sending up a cloud of steam like a tiny locomotive. You're about to discover what daily life inside a covered wagon was really like when winter arrived. And let us be honest, you probably won't survive this with your modern preference for central heating and soft socks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As you settle in, tell us where you're listening from and what time it is there. Now, dim the lights, let your shoulders loosen, and follow the faint wheel tracks into the snow. The first thing you notice is not the cold itself, but the silence around it. Snow swallows the ordinary clatter of the trail. Hooves land with soft thumps. Wooden wheels groan instead of rattle. Voices seem to fall flat in the air, as though even conversation has become too tired to travel far. You stand beside a covered wagon that has already carried your family through weeks of dust, rain, and rough ground. Now it waits under a thin grey sky, its canvas top pale against the snow. The wagon is not a romantic cottage on wheels. It is a tool, a storehouse, a shelter of last resort, and sometimes a stubborn obstacle that must be pushed, pulled, repaired, and pleaded with. Your family gathers near it in layers that never feel warm enough. A father checks harness straps with stiff hands. A mother folds a blanket around the youngest child while pretending not to shiver. An older girl holds weak coffee near her face, using the steam as much as the drink. A boy pokes frozen mud near the wheel, convinced this is useful work. You belong to them now, their worries, delays, hopes, and all travel with you. A mainstream fact of overland migration is that many families headed west in large wagon trains for protection, shared labour, and practical help. The famous migration routes carried hundreds of thousands of travellers during the middle decades of the 19th century. Most planned to travel in warmer months because winter could trap wagons, kill livestock, and turn an already difficult journey into a test of endurance. Yet plans are fragile things. A late departure, a broken axle, illness, flooded rivers, or slow animals can push a family into colder weather. Winter does not ask whether you are ready, it simply arrives. The trail ahead is faintly visible. Snow has covered old wheel ruts, which sounds helpful until you realise those ruts once showed where the ground was firm. Now every white patch might hide a hole, a rock, or frozen mud deep enough to twist an ankle. The lead driver studies the land like a book written in snow. You breathe in, and your nose stings. When you exhale into your scarf, the cloth becomes damp, then colder, then stiff at the edges. It is a small betrayal, but winter is full of those. The family has not truly slept. They have rested in fragments. Someone woke each time the wind pushed against the canvas. Someone checked the animals. Someone worried that the fire had gone out. Someone listened to a child cough and counted the pauses between breaths. Morning does not begin with an alarm clock. It begins with discomfort becoming impossible to ignore. You place one hand on the wagon's wooden side. The boards feel harder than stone. Frost traces the iron fittings in delicate silver lines. Beautiful in the way only something completely inconvenient can be beautiful. A small icicle hangs beneath a bracket. The boy breaks it off and tastes it before anyone can stop him. That brings you to one of the stranger habits mentioned in some pioneer recollections. Children sometimes treated fresh icicles, clean snow, or frozen berries as winter sweets. though adults knew that snow gathered near camps could be anything but clean. It is charming until you remember the animals nearby and the lack of modern sanitation. Nature's desert is not always inspected. The wagon train stirs. A woman calls for a missing mitten. A man wrestles with a frozen buckle, mutters something rude, then changes the word because children are listening. A dog circles the camp, lifting its paws because the ground hurts. Smoke rises from two small fires and bends sideways in the wind. The cold shapes every decision. Do you move today or wait? Do you risk the exposed ridge or stay near the trees? Do you use more firewood now or leave it for later? Do you feed the animals extra, even though the supply is shrinking? Historians still argue whether many winter disasters on the Western trails were caused mainly by poor planning, unusually severe weather, or the simple fact that travellers often had too little reliable information. Some ignored warnings. Others made reasonable choices and were still trapped by conditions no one could control. You understand that courage does not feel grand from inside the moment. It feels like tying a strap with numb fingers. It feels like swallowing fear because a child is watching. It feels like saying the road may improve after the next rise. Even when you have no idea whether that is true, the sky lightens, but the sun does not appear. Snow reflects weak grey light until the whole landscape seems to glow without warmth. The animals are brought forward. Their breath rolls around their heads. Their coats are rough with damp. They lean into the harness slowly, as if deciding whether this journey deserves their cooperation. The wheels resist. Frozen earth grips them. Men and older children push at the wagon sides. Boots slip. Shoulders strain. Someone laughs once because the alternative is complaining. Then the wheel moves. Only an inch at first, with a deep wooden creak, then another. Snow breaks beneath the rim. The wagon lurches forward, and the family reacts as if a great victory has occurred. Perhaps it has. You walk beside the wagon because riding adds weight and makes the animals work harder. Your steps settle into a slow rhythm behind you. The camp disappears beneath drifting snow, leaving dark ashes and crushed footprints. Ahead, the road bends into bare trees. You do not know how far you will travel today. You do not know where you will sleep tonight. You know only that the wagon moves. The family stays together, and the winter morning opens before you, quiet and immense, while the canvas shelter creaks at your shoulder and carries nearly everything you still call home. The wagon rolls beneath bare branches, and you begin to understand how little stands between your family and the weather. The white canvas above you looks almost solid from a distance, like the wall of a small house. Up close, it is simply cloth stretched over curved wooden bows, tied down with ropes, patched in several places, and stained by smoke, rain, dust, and many hands. You walk beside it while the wheels grind over frozen ground, every few moments. The canvas gives a dry snap as the wind catches it. The sound is not loud, yet it keeps your attention. It reminds you that this shelter can tear, a branch can punch through it, a spark can burn it. Heavy snow can weigh it down until the boughs bend and the fabric sags toward the supplies below. The wagon itself is usually smaller than modern imagination suggests. Many emigrant wagons are farm wagons adapted for travel, rather than the enormous freight wagons shown in dramatic paintings. The wagon bed may be only about 10 or 12 feet long and roughly 4 feet wide. That is enough space for tools, food, bedding, spare clothing, cooking equipment, and perhaps a child who is ill or too young to walk. It is not enough space for an entire family to sit comfortably while the scenery passes. So you walk. Your home moves beside you at the pace of an animal. It has no hallway, private corner, or pleasant stove glowing in the centre. It is closer to a narrow cupboard on wheels, except the cupboard leaks, shakes, and occasionally tries to roll backward down a hill. The wooden sides come up to your waist, iron bands reinforce the wheels, and every joint speaks in its own tired voice. There is a squeak near the rear axle, a knock from a loose box, and a steady groan from the hubs. Grease must be applied regularly, often using animal fat, pine tar, or whatever useful material can be found. When the grease grows stiff in the cold, the wheel complains with renewed determination. The canvas covering is commonly made from heavy cotton duck or another sturdy cloth. It may be treated with oil, paint, or other mixtures to resist rain. That treatment helps, but it does not create a perfect barrier. Water finds seams, wind finds gaps. Fine snow enters around the front and rear openings, collecting in corners or melting against blankets. You reach beneath the edge of the cover and feel cold air sliding along the wagon bed. It touches your wrist like a thin blade. Someone has stuffed rags into one opening. Another crack is blocked with folded cloth. Nothing fits perfectly because the wagon is always shifting. Inside, the smell is dense and familiar. There is canvas, damp wool, leather, flour, dried meat, lamp oil, and wood. A sack of onions adds its own opinion. Somewhere beneath a blanket lies a pair of boots that should have been aired yesterday. Privacy is not the only thing missing. Fresh air can become complicated too. A quirky detail appears in some accounts of wagon travel and frontier improvisation. Families sometimes hung cups, herbs, tools, or keepsakes from the wagon bows, using every spare inch above the cargo. In cold weather, these objects swing and chatter through the night. Imagine trying to sleep while a tin cup gently knocks against a spoon for 6 hours. It is less a lullaby and more a patient test of character. The bows arch over your head like the ribs of a pale animal. They're usually made from flexible wood, bent into shape and fitted into sockets along the wagon sides, if one cracks. The cover loses support. A repair might involve splints, rope, leather strips, or a carefully chosen branch. There is no service station ahead. The nearest replacement part may be growing beside the trail. Historians still argue whether emigrants generally thought of the covered wagon as a true shelter, or mainly as a vehicle for protecting cargo. Diaries suggest both ideas. Families sometimes slept inside when conditions demanded it, but many preferred tents, open ground, or the space beneath the wagon when weather allowed. The wagon protected possessions first. Human comfort came later, as it so often does when flour barrels and tool chests have been given priority. That fact changes the picture in your mind. The wagon is not a cosy room into which everyone climbs at sunset. It is already full. Bags are wedged tightly against boxes. Bedding rests across sacks. Cooking pots hang from hooks. A firearm may be secured within reach. Every object must be placed so the weight stays balanced. Too much weight at the rear makes steering difficult. Too much on one side strains the wagon and encourages tipping. Heavy goods settle lower, while lighter items are packed above them. Things needed during the day must remain accessible. Though accessible is a generous word when the coffee is beneath 3 blankets and a crate of tools, the family has learned where each object belongs. The mother can reach a medicine bottle without searching. The father knows which rope is strongest. The older children know not to move the small box of needles and thread. The youngest child knows exactly where a sweet might be hidden and considers this knowledge more important than everything else. Snow begins again, fine and dry. It lands on the canvas but does not melt. Soon a pale dusting forms along the upper curve. When the wagon stops, someone must brush it away before it becomes heavier. Wet snow is dangerous because its weight can pull at the cover and burden the bows. During a storm, the family may wake repeatedly to clear the roof, performing the same miserable task in darkness. A small lantern might provide light, but flame-near treated canvas, dry cloth, and pack supplies demands care. Candles can drip, lamps can spill, and sparks from nearby fires can drift farther than expected. Fire is warmth, food, and survival, yet beside a wagon is also a constant threat. You place your palm against the canvas from inside. The cloth is so cold that you feel it immediately. In some places, frost forms on the inner surface from breath and trapped moisture. When the temperature rises slightly, droplets fall. They land on bedding, clothing, and faces. The wagon creates shelter, but it also creates its own weather. Outside, the family checks the ropes, knots tighten in the cold, leather contracts, wooden parts shift as they freeze and thaw, a loose cover can flap itself to pieces, so every tie matters. The wagon moves again, creaking into the white afternoon. You stay close enough to touch its side. It is fragile, cramped, and endlessly demanding. Yet it carries food, blankets, tools, and memories across country that offers none of those things freely. As the wind presses harder, you understand the true comfort it provides. Not warmth, not space, not silence. It provides a boundary, thin but meaningful, between your family and the winter sky. That thin boundary moves with you through the afternoon, carrying nearly everything your family believes it cannot live without. Yet the longer you study the wagon, the more obvious the cruel little puzzle becomes. You may bring what you need, but the wagon can carry only so much, and the trail has no sympathy for sentimental packing. Before departure, your family stands beside a growing pile of possessions. At first, every object seems essential. A cast-iron stove promises warm meals. A heavy chest protects clothing. A rocking chair belongs to grandmother. A framed portrait carries the face of someone who cannot come. Books provide comfort. Dishes make life feel civilized. Tools may build a future home. Then someone looks at the wagon, the animals, and the distance ahead. Choices begin. A typical emigrant family tries to balance food, equipment, clothing, bedding, weapons, medicine, and personal treasures within a strict weight limit. Oxen can pull impressive loads on firm ground, but the trail is rarely firm for long. Mud, steep slopes, sand, snow, and river crossings multiply the effort. Every extra pound becomes a question asked again at every hill. You lift a flour sack and feel its dense weight settle against your chest. Flour is useful almost every day. It becomes bread, biscuits, dumplings, gravy, or a thickener for whatever stew can be assembled. It earns its place quickly. Beside it rests cornmeal, rice, beans, coffee, sugar, salt, dried fruit, bacon, and perhaps hard crackers. These are compact foods that keep reasonably well. Fresh food is welcome when available, but it spoils, freezes, bruises, and attracts attention from animals. A barrel of apples sounds delightful until the wagon hits several hundred miles of ruts, and the apples slowly become fragrant paste. The mainstream historical record shows that guidebooks and emigrant advice lists often recommended carefully measured provisions for each adult. Families might be told to carry hundreds of pounds of flour, substantial quantities of bacon, beans, sugar, coffee, and dried fruit. The exact amounts varied, but the principle remained simple. Food consumed much of the wagon's useful capacity because there might be long stretches where little could be purchased. You begin packing from the bottom. Heavy items settle close to the wagon floor and near the centre, where they are less likely to upset the balance. Barrels and crates are wedged tightly so they do not slide. A loose chest can become dangerous on a slope. A rolling water container can strike the wagon wall with enough force to crack wood or injure anyone unlucky enough to be inside. The tool collection is another argument waiting to happen. You need an axe, shovel, hammer, saw, rope, chains, spare bolts, nails, and materials for repairs. You may need farming tools at the destination. You may want a plough, but a plough is heavy. So are blacksmith tools, anvils, and grinding stones. Someone suggests leaving the large iron kettle. No one likes this suggestion. The kettle has cooked meals for years. It can boil water, prepare stew, wash clothing, render fat, and heat stones. It is far more useful than the decorative dishes someone else wants to bring. The kettle stays. The dishes do not all stay. One plate is wrapped in a shirt. 2 cups are packed inside a pot. A small bowl is placed between sacks. Anything fragile must justify the trouble of protecting it, which is not easy when the wagon shakes from dawn until evening. Clothing takes less room when folded tightly, but winter clothing is bulky. Wool coats, flannel shirts, shawls, caps, mittens, stockings, spare boots, and blankets spread across the packing area like a fabric flood. You cannot depend on buying replacements. A torn sleeve must be mended. A lost mitten becomes a serious problem. A wet blanket may take hours to dry. Bedding is rolled and tied. Feather beds are wonderfully warm, but they consume space and can absorb moisture. Quilts carry practical value and family memory together. Some are made from scraps of older garments, so a single patch may remind you of a wedding dress, a child's shirt, or a father's worn coat. You press one quilt into a narrow gap between 2 crates. It smells faintly of cedar and home. A quirky detail from emigrant accounts is that families sometimes packed seeds inside clothing. Bedding, or small containers, guarding them as carefully as food. These seeds represented future gardens, familiar flowers, and a small piece of the landscape left behind. A handful of beans or flower seeds weighed almost nothing. Yet it might matter deeply when the family reached strange soil. Not everything survives the final inspection. A chair is removed. A second trunk follows. Several books are placed on the ground. One Bible returns to the wagon. A schoolbook also returns after a child protests. A collection of old newspapers does not. The family keeps a photograph, perhaps protected in a small case. It keeps letters tied with ribbon. It keeps a few pieces of jewellery that carry more emotional weight than physical weight. These objects do not help pull a wheel from mud. But people are not machines. Survival includes remembering who you are. Historians continue to debate how often emigrants truly abandon treasured possessions beside the trail, rather than losing them through breakage, trade, theft, or necessity later in the journey. Popular stories describe roads lined with furniture and heavy goods. Diaries confirm that some objects were discarded, especially when animals weakened. Though the dramatic scale may sometimes have grown in later retellings, you can understand how it happens. At the beginning, you pack for the life you hope to continue. After weeks of travel, you pack for the next mile. The wagon settles under its load. The springs, if it has them, do little to soften the weight. Many emigrant wagons rely on sturdy construction rather than comfort. The wheels take the burden, and every rough patch sends a tremor through the cargo. Inside, the arrangement becomes a private map. Food sits in one region, tools occupy another, bedding covers the top. A small medicine box remains close at hand. A sewing kit is tucked safely where it will not spill. Fire-starting materials stay dry. Ammunition, when carried, must be protected from sparks and moisture. The children receive strict instructions not to climb over everything. They climb over everything. A younger child squeezes into a narrow space beside the blankets and announces that it is a bedroom. An older child points out that it is actually beside the onions. The bedroom becomes less appealing. Outside, a final pile remains on the ground. The family stares at it in silence. Each object once belonged somewhere indoors. Now the open trail decides its value. You touch the wooden frame of the discarded chair. It feels smooth from years of use. Leaving it seems almost disrespectful. Yet the animals must pull the load through winter, and affection cannot make iron lighter. So the chair stays behind, the wagon moves forward, carrying food, tools, blankets, seeds, letters, and the carefully reduced shape of a former life behind you. The abandoned object grows smaller in the snow until it becomes only a dark mark beside the road. Ahead, everything you have chosen presses close around you, and soon, when darkness arrives, your family must somehow find room among it to sleep. Night settles before the family is ready for it, and the wagon that carried flour, tools, blankets, seeds, letters, and the carefully reduced remains of home must now become a bedroom. There is no graceful transformation, no hidden bed folds from the wall, no curtain slides neatly across a private sleeping nook. Instead, everyone begins moving objects from one inconvenient place to another, creating just enough room for tired bodies to fit among the supplies. You climb into the wagon by placing one boot on the wheel hub, gripping the wooden side and pulling yourself upward. The boards creak beneath your weight. Cold air follows you through the rear opening before someone lowers the canvas flap and ties it loosely. Inside, the darkness feels close. A lantern glows for a moment, lighting the curved boughs overhead and throwing long shadows across stacked sacks. The air smells of wool, leather, onions, old smoke, and damp canvas. It is not an unpleasant smell exactly. It is simply the scent of 6 people, several weeks of travel, and almost no opportunity to air anything properly. Your sleeping place is decided less by age or preference than by geometry. The smallest children may lie inside the wagon because they take up less room and need the most protection. An ill traveller might also be given space within. Adults and older children often sleep beneath the wagon, beside it, in tents, or directly under the open sky when conditions allow. Winter changes those choices. Snow covers the ground. Wind searches every exposed surface. The frozen earth draws heat from the body with remarkable efficiency. So tonight, everyone tries to squeeze closer. Bedding is unrolled across sacks and crates. Blankets soften sharp corners but cannot remove them. Your shoulder rests against a flour bag. One knee presses near the medicine box. Your feet must remain turned slightly because a barrel blocks the full length of the wagon bed. The historical record makes clear that covered wagons were usually cargo vehicles rather than comfortable passenger coaches. Most travellers walked beside them during the day, and sleeping inside was often limited by the supplies packed within, in bad weather. However, families made use of every sheltered inch, even when that meant resting in positions that would make a modern mattress advertisement seem deeply insulting. You lower yourself carefully. The first sensation is hardness. Even thick quilts cannot completely disguise wooden boards or tightly packed cargo. The second sensation is cold. Blankets trap warmth slowly, and every layer feels chilled when first pulled over you. The third sensation is the awareness that someone is breathing very close to your ear. Privacy disappears quickly. Clothing may remain on through the night. Removing boots is useful if they are wet, but putting frozen boots back on in the morning is a misery all its own. Some travellers keep footwear near their bodies or beneath blankets to prevent it from becoming completely rigid. Others wake to find leather stiff enough to resist every attempt at cooperation. You tuck your hands beneath your arms. Beside you, a child turns over and drives an elbow gently into your ribs. Nobody apologizes because everyone is too tired, and because there is nowhere else for the elbow to go. The wagon tilts slightly where one wheel rests in a shallow rut. This means every sleeper slowly slides toward the lower side during the night. Bodies shift together by inches. Someone wakes, pushes backward, rearranges a blanket, and begins the process again. One lesser-known detail from emigrant diaries is that heated stones, bricks, or wrapped bottles of warm water were sometimes placed near feet or bedding when fuel and containers allowed. The comfort could be wonderful for a little while. It could also be uneven. One person enjoys warm toes while another discovers that the stone is far hotter than expected, and must attempt a silent midnight rescue beneath several layers of quilts. Outside, the wind brushes against the canvas. It begins as a low murmur, then grows into a steady rubbing sound. The fabric moves inward between the bows and relaxes again. Fine grains of snow slip through a gap near the opening and collect in a pale line. You hear everything. A harness buckle taps against wood, an ox shifts its weight, a branch snaps somewhere beyond the fire, someone beneath a nearby wagon coughs. Another sleeper whispers a prayer. The fire makes a soft collapsing sound as one log breaks apart. Sleep on the trail is rarely a single deep descent. It comes in pieces. You drift for a few minutes, wake when the wagon creaks, then drift again. Your mind keeps listening even while your body tries to rest. Is the wind stronger? Are the animals calm? Has the fire gone out? Is the child beside you breathing normally? Researchers remain divided over how often whole families slept inside their wagons during severe winter conditions. Some journals suggest that interior space was reserved for small children, the sick, or valuable supplies. Other accounts describe desperate crowding when storms made outdoor sleeping impossible. The answer likely depended on wagon size, family number, cargo arrangement, and just how cruel the weather had become. Tonight, the weather is cruel enough. Condensation gathers overhead from warm breath meeting cold canvas. Tiny droplets form along the inner surface. Some freeze, others fall without warning. A drop lands on your forehead. You wipe it away and say nothing. The youngest child begins to fuss. The mother reaches across two bodies, finds the child by touch, and pulls another fold of blanket around small shoulders. Her movement sends cold air beneath the covers, creating a brief wave of silent resentment from everyone nearby. Still, the child settles. The family shares warmth simply by being close. Human bodies become part of the shelter. Every breath, every shoulder, every pair of feet adds a little heat to the cramped interior. It is not enough to make the wagon warm, but it creates a small pocket where survival feels more possible. You begin to notice the different textures around you. Coarse wool scratches your chin, a quilt seam presses against your cheek. The wooden side feels icy through your sleeve, beneath your palm. A sack of grain gives slightly, almost like a lumpy mattress designed by someone with a personal dislike of comfort. There are no separate rooms for fear, irritation, grief, or exhaustion. All of it lies together. A father worries about the road ahead while pretending to sleep. A mother calculates how long the food will last. An older child wonders whether the abandoned chair is already buried beneath snow. A younger child dreams of a warm kitchen that may no longer belong to the family. You listen to their breathing gradually slow. The wagon becomes quieter. Even the hanging cup that knocked against the spoon in the last shelter has been wrapped in cloth tonight. A tiny victory over unnecessary noise. Beyond the canvas, snow continues to fall. It covers tracks, ashes, wheel marks, and the hard impressions left by boots. By morning, the camp may look almost untouched. Inside, you remain folded among blankets and supplies, unable to stretch, unable to turn without negotiation, and strangely grateful for the thin roof above you. The ground beneath the wagon is frozen. The wind presses at every seam, yet for a few hours, the family rests together in the narrow space it has created, each person lending warmth to the next as sleep finally reaches you. Your last clear thought is that dawn will require these same stiff bodies to rise, dress, and face the cold again. Dawn arrives as a faint silver glow through the canvas, and before you can think about standing, walking, or helping with the animals. You must first solve the complicated problem of getting dressed without uncovering too much of yourself at once. The blanket around your shoulders has trapped a little warmth during the night. The moment you lift one corner, cold air slides underneath and settles against your skin. It feels personal. Winter has been waiting politely outside the quilt, and now it sees an opening. You move slowly. Your clothing begins with linen or cotton close to the body, though neither fabric feels especially kind in this weather. Over that comes wool or flannel whenever the family can afford it. Wool is valuable because it continues to provide some insulation even when damp, and dampness is nearly impossible to avoid on a winter trail. Your own breath moistens your scarf, snow melts on your shoulders, sweat gathers beneath heavy layers while you push the wagon or climb a slope. Then the family stops, your body cools, and that moisture turns against you. Cold clothing is unpleasant. Wet clothing can become dangerous. You pull on stockings that feel stiff from yesterday. They have dried only partly, and the fabric is cold enough to make your toes curl. You rub your feet with both hands before sliding them into place. One stocking has been darned at the heel, and the repair makes a small ridge beneath your foot. You will feel that ridge all day. Next come trousers or a long skirt. Depending on who you are within the family, women and girls often wear several layers, including shifts, petticoats, wool dresses, shawls, and cloaks. Men and boys rely on shirts, trousers, vests, coats, and whatever extra garments can be fitted beneath or above them. Fashion has not vanished, but survival now has the louder voice. The broad skirts commonly worn by women can provide useful layers of trapped air, yet they also collect mud, snow, and ice near the hem. Fabric becomes heavy when wet. A skirt brushing through deep snow may freeze into stiff folds. You can almost hear the garment objecting as you walk. Women sometimes pin their skirts higher for difficult travel, revealing sturdy boots and lower petticoats. This practical adjustment might offend strict ideas of modesty in settled society. On the trail. Settled society is not present to help pull the wagon from a drift, so its opinion becomes less urgent. Men have their own difficulties. Trousers wear thin at the knees and seat, coats split beneath the arms, buttons disappear into snow. A missing button seems like a tiny problem until wind enters through the opening for 9 consecutive hours. Every small gap matters. You fasten your shirt and add a wool vest. The vest is not thick, but it protects the center of your body without restricting your arms. A coat follows. It smells of smoke because it has hung near countless fires, absorbing each evening into its fibers. Your family knows that layering works better than trusting one heavy garment. Air held between fabrics slows the loss of warmth. People living and travelling in cold climates understood this long before anyone explained it with modern scientific vocabulary. They learned through experience, discomfort, and the memorable consequences of getting it wrong. A respected piece of practical knowledge among emigrants was that wool made better winter clothing than many lighter materials. Wool stockings, shirts, blankets, mittens, and caps were recommended because they were durable and warm. Yet good wool garments cost money, and not every traveller owned enough of them. Poorer families combined old clothing, homemade pieces, patched coats, and improvised coverings. You wrap a scarf around your neck. It has already developed a frozen edge where your breath collected during yesterday's march. You soften the cloth between your fingers, then pull it over your mouth. For a few minutes it feels comforting. Soon it will grow damp again. Your hands are next. Gloves allow better movement, but mittens usually keep fingers warmer because the fingers share heat. The mitten on your right hand has a repaired thumb. The left one does not quite match, somewhere along the road. Exact pairs has become a luxury. A curious practice appears in several memories of frontier winters. Travellers sometimes tucked warmed cloth, heated stones, or even baked potatoes into pockets and mittens for temporary comfort. A potato could warm your hand during the morning and become part of your lunch later, assuming you did not forget it in a coat pocket until it turned into an unpleasant little archaeological discovery. Children are inspected before they leave the wagon. A mother checks ears, fingers, and toes. She presses the tip of a child's nose and asks whether it can still be felt. She tightens a scarf, adds another pair of stockings, and pulls a cap low over the ears. Caps matter more than pride. A knitted cap, wool hood, bonnet, or fur-lined hat helps protect the head and face from wind. Frost gathers on eyelashes, hair near the mouth becomes damp from breath. Ears can lose feeling before the wearer recognizes the danger. Experts continue to disagree about how consistently emigrant families recognize the early signs of frostbite and dangerous chilling. Some diary entries show careful awareness of numb skin and freezing extremities. Other accounts suggest that people underestimated risk, especially when exhaustion made judgment slower. The language used at the time was not always precise, and surviving descriptions can make it difficult to separate mild injury from severe cold exposure. You step down from the wagon. Snow enters the top of one boot immediately. The boot itself is sturdy leather, repaired more than once. Leather offers protection, but it is not magically waterproof. Grease may be rubbed into it to resist moisture. Wax, animal fat, or oil can help seal seams. Too much treatment softens the leather or attracts dirt. Too little allows melted snow to reach the stockings. Your family has no heated room where boots can dry gently overnight. Footwear may be placed near a fire, but too much heat can shrink, crack, or harden leather. A careless traveller may wake to dry boots that no longer fit. You stamp your feet and begin walking beside the wagon. Within minutes, your body warms. Within an hour, you may sweat beneath the coat. This is another quiet threat. The instinct is to dress as heavily as possible, but movement produces heat. If you become soaked with perspiration and later stop in the wind, you cool rapidly, so you adjust as you go. The scarf loosens, the coat opens slightly, mittens come off during heavy work and go back on the moment movement slows. Clothing becomes a system managed throughout the day rather than a simple decision made in the morning. Repairs happen constantly. A needle, thread, spare buttons, and scraps of fabric are among the most valuable small objects in the wagon. At night, someone mends torn seams by lantern light. Socks are darned, mittens are patched. A worn coat receives another piece of cloth at the elbow. Nothing is thrown away merely because it looks old. A garment can be cut down for a child. A blanket can become a coat. A ruined shirt can become bandages, cleaning cloths, stuffing, or strips for tying equipment. Even small scraps find a purpose. The family's appearance slowly changes along the trail. Colours fade, hems darken, patches multiply. Clothing that began as Sunday best becomes ordinary wear. Social distinctions remain. But winter reduces everyone to the same basic questions. Are you warm enough? Are you dry? Can you still feel your toes? The wagon creaks onward, and the sky brightens without offering much heat. Your layers rub and pull with every step. Wool scratches your neck, damp stockings cling to your feet. The repaired mitten fits awkwardly around your thumb. Still, each piece protects you. By the time the sun reaches its weak midday height, you understand that winter clothing is not a costume surrounding the journey. It is part of the daily struggle itself, adjusted, dried, patched, borrowed, and guarded with care. And when the light begins to fade again, those same garments will be shaken free of snow, hung wherever space allows, and prepared for the dark morning chores waiting before sunrise. The first chore begins before you are fully awake. A hand touches your shoulder in the darkness, and for one hopeful second you imagine that someone is merely adjusting the blanket. Then a quiet voice tells you the fire is nearly dead. You open your eyes. The wagon is black except for a faint grey patch where morning waits beyond the canvas. Your breath hangs close to your face. The blanket feels heavy. Your knees are stiff, and one foot has gone numb beneath a sleeping child. Outside, an animal shifts in its harness and sends a wooden knock through the frozen camp. You ease yourself upright without striking your head on a wagon bow. The movement wakes 3 other people, though they pretend otherwise. Nobody wishes to volunteer for the cold. Your boots are waiting beside the bedding. They are not frozen solid, but they have developed enough stiffness to resist your feet. You push one on, then the other, working your heels downward while trying not to disturb the supplies stacked around you. The moment the canvas flap rises, winter enters. It pours through the opening, sharp and clean, carrying the smell of snow, ash, leather, and animals. You climb down. Place one hand against the wagon for balance, and feel the frozen ground through the soles of your boots. The fire is a shallow bed of dark ash. You kneel beside it and search for warmth with a stick. A small red glow appears beneath the grey surface. It is no larger than a berry, but everyone depends on it. Keeping embers alive through the night saves time, fuel, and precious matches. Friction methods are possible, and flint with steel remains useful. But neither feels attractive when your hands are numb and breakfast is waiting in the imagination of several hungry children. You gather dry grass, bark, wood shavings, or a twist of cloth prepared for this purpose. The tinder goes close to the ember. You bend low and blow gently. Ash rises into your face. Your eyes water, your nose runs, the ember brightens, then fades, then brightens again. There is a delicate moment when the whole morning seems to rest on a thread of smoke. You blow once more, and a tiny flame curls through the tinder. It catches. You feed it thin twigs first. Larger pieces come later. A fire built too quickly can smother itself, which feels like an unnecessary lesson to receive before sunrise. One familiar reality of overland travel is that fuel could be difficult to find, especially on open plains. Families burned wood when it was available, but they also used dried animal dung, particularly buffalo chips, as fuel. It sounds unpleasant to a modern listener, yet once dried, it burns with far less drama than the name suggests. You collect whatever fuel remains near the wagon. Some pieces are damp, others are frozen together when the flames strengthen. You hold your hands near them and feel heat return painfully to your fingers. Behind you, the camp begins to move. Someone coughs inside another wagon. A child complains about a missing stocking. A man walks past carrying a bucket and wearing an expression that suggests the bucket has personally offended him. The animals must be checked before the family thinks seriously about itself. You cross the camp toward the oxen. Their dark shapes stand quietly against the snow. Frost clings to the hair around their mouths. One animal turns its head and watches you approach with deep, patient suspicion. You inspect the ropes, yokes, and harness pieces. Leather can stiffen in the cold, knots tighten overnight. Metal fittings burn against bare skin, so you keep your mittens on even though they make small tasks awkward. You run a hand along one animal's shoulder and feel for swelling, sores, or unusual heat. A rub beneath the yoke may worsen during the day. A cracked hoof can slow the entire train. The animals are not background scenery. They are the muscles of the journey. Feed comes next. Hay, grain, or other fodder must be rationed carefully. Grazing is poor beneath snow, and winter grass offers little nourishment if supplies are limited. Every feeding becomes a calculation. Too little weakens the team. Too much now may leave nothing for later. The ox lowers its head into the feed. Its jaws move slowly. Steam rises from its nostrils. A lesser-known camp habit was the use of bells on livestock. especially animals allowed to graze. The sound helped owners locate them in darkness or rough country in winter. A bell could become muffled by snow or ice, turning a confident clang into a dull little complaint somewhere beyond the wagons. You listen now and hear one from the far side of camp. The sound is slow, irregular, and strangely comforting. Water must also be found. The bucket carried by the offended man is lowered into a stream where ice has been broken near the bank. If no open water is available, snow may be melted. Though this requires fuel and produces less water than expected, a pot filled with loose snow collapses into a discouraging puddle. You carry back a bucket that seems heavier with every step. Water sloshes over the rim and freezes in a thin glaze along the outside. By the time you reach the fire, your arms ache. A portion goes to the cooking pot, another is saved for drinking, more will be needed for the animals, washing, and whatever cleaning can be managed. Breakfast begins plainly. Bacon may be sliced if the family still has it. Cornmeal can become mush. Flour may be mixed into biscuits. Coffee is treasured, though it may be weak, stretched, or replaced with roasted grain or roots when supplies run low. The mother of the family works beside the fire while wrapped in a shawl. Her fingers move quickly despite the cold. She measures by habit rather than by a neat set of kitchen tools, a pinch of salt, a handful of meal, enough water to bring the mixture together. You stir the pot. Smoke follows your face no matter where you sit. You shift left. The wind changes. You shift right. The smoke follows again. Because morning fires enjoy small victories. Specialists continue to question how strictly wagon trains followed fixed schedules during winter travel. Some diaries describe disciplined routines with early rising, assigned duties, and regular departures. Other records reveal delays, confusion, illness, broken equipment, and families moving at different speeds. The ideal camp may wake in perfect order, but the real one often begins with missing mittens and an ox that refuses to stand in the correct place. The children receive chores according to age. One gathers small sticks, another shakes snow from blankets. An older child carries feed, watches younger siblings, or helps pack cooking tools. Even the smallest may be told to hold a cup, guard a mitten, or stay away from the fire, which is often the most difficult assignment of all. Bedding must be rolled before snow dampens it further. Blankets are lifted, shaken, folded, and tied. Frost scatters from the fabric in tiny crystals. The inside of the wagon is rearranged once again, changing from sleeping space back into cargo space. Every object returns to its place. The kettle cools enough to pack, cups are wiped, a spoon is found beneath a sack, the medicine box is checked. The fire is allowed to burn low, then covered or extinguished carefully so no hidden spark remains behind. By now the sky is brighter, though the sun still hides behind cloud. Your body has warmed through work. The stiffness in your back has eased. Your fingers move more easily. Hunger sharpens the smell of breakfast until even plain cornmeal seems generous. You eat standing near the wagon. The food is hot for only a short time. Steam rises from the bowl, touches your face, and disappears. You swallow quickly before the surface cools. Around you, the camp changes shape. Animals are brought forward. Yokes are lifted. Ropes tighten. Wheels are checked. Children are counted, then counted again. The morning that began with one dim ember now fills with sound. Wood creaks, metal taps, oxen breathe. Adults call instructions across the snow. Somewhere, the little bell continues its quiet, uneven rhythm. You take the final mouthful, wipe the bowl, and place it inside the wagon. Then you lean your shoulder against the wooden side as the family prepares to move, already knowing that tomorrow, long before sunrise, the entire sequence will begin again. The wagon begins moving. but the taste of breakfast remains with you only briefly by midday. Hunger returns with the steady certainty of the wheels, and by evening, the entire camp will once again revolve around the question of food. Cooking on a winter trail is not simply a matter of choosing a meal, it depends on fuel, weather, time, supplies, equipment, and the mood of the fire. The fire, naturally, considers itself an independent member of the family and rarely accepts instructions. When the wagon train stops near a stand of bare cottonwoods, everyone looks first for shelter from the wind. The wagons form a loose line rather than the perfect circle shown in later paintings. Each family chooses a place where animals can be managed, and smoke is unlikely to blow directly into the bedding. You carry the kettle from the wagon. It is darkened by soot and polished at the handle from years of use. A smaller pan follows, then a wooden spoon, a knife, and a tin cup. Every item has weight. But every item also has several purposes. The kettle can prepare stew, heat wash water, boil coffee, melt snow, and warm stones for the bedding. Nothing earns space by doing only one job. The fire must be coaxed into life while daylight fades. You gather split wood, dry bark, and twigs from beneath branches where snow has not reached. Much of the wood is damp. Some pieces hiss when placed near the flame. Others release a sharp, resinous smell that mingles with smoke and cold air. Soon your eyes water again. You crouch on one side of the fire, and the smoke follows. You move to the other side, and it follows there too. The family accepts this as one of nature's smaller jokes. A well-documented feature of emigrant food was its dependence on durable staples: flour, cornmeal, beans, rice, salt pork, bacon, coffee, sugar, and dried fruit formed the foundation of many trail meals. These foods travelled reasonably well and could be prepared with limited equipment. Variety depended on hunting, trading, gathering, or reaching a settlement where supplies remained available. Tonight, the meal begins with beans that have soaked since morning in a covered container. Even softened beans require long cooking, which consumes fuel. Someone must remember to soak them before the day begins. Forgetting means waiting much longer or chewing something with the texture of polished gravel. You pour the beans into the kettle and add water. A piece of salt pork goes in next. It is dense, heavily preserved, and useful for adding fat and flavour. It may also be so salty that it requires soaking or boiling before it becomes pleasant. Pleasant, of course, is a flexible word on the trail. The kettle hangs over the fire from a simple support. Some families use an iron tripod, others suspend pots from a horizontal pole balanced between forked sticks. The arrangement looks fragile, especially when the wind moves the flames sideways, but it can be adjusted to control heat. You stir slowly. The beans settle at the bottom and threaten to burn. The broth smells smoky, salty, and comforting. Steam rises into the darkening air and drifts across the camp, attracting children who suddenly become intensely interested in helping. One child offers to taste the broth. Another also offers. A third has already tasted it. The mother sends them to fetch snow for melting, choosing a clean patch away from animals, wagon wheels, and the busiest parts of camp. This is an important distinction. White does not always mean clean, especially where several dozen oxen have spent the afternoon. Snow is packed into a second pot. It collapses almost immediately as it warms. What looked like a full container becomes a shallow layer of water. More snow is added, then more again. Cooking in winter creates a constant demand for fuel. Water freezes, food cools quickly, pots take longer to heat when the wind steals warmth from every surface. A fire shield made from stones, logs, earth, or the side of a bank can help. Placing a fire too close to the wagon is risky, but placing it too far away means carrying everything through snow. The family chooses inconvenience over flames climbing the canvas. Bread presents another challenge. Without a household oven, you must improvise. Dough can be baked in a covered iron pot with hot coals placed beneath and above it. Biscuits can cook in a skillet. Thin cakes can be fried in grease. Dough may even be wrapped around a stick and held near the fire. Though the result is often black outside and stubbornly raw within, tonight you mix flour, salt, water, and a little fat in a bowl. There is no delicate kneading on a clean kitchen table. Your hands are cold. The bowl rests on a crate. Ash moves through the air. A child watches closely, hoping some mysterious transformation will turn plain dough into cake. It does not. You shape small biscuits and place them in the pan. Grease crackles around their edges. Their smell is simple and warm, and for a moment the camp feels less exposed. One odd culinary habit recorded in frontier reminiscences involved using a clean shovel blade as an emergency cooking surface. Dough, meat, or cakes could be placed on heated metal when no pan was available. The important word is clean. Though standards naturally depended on how hungry everyone was and what the shovel had been doing earlier, coffee is prepared in another vessel. It may be boiled strongly, weakly, or repeatedly, depending on supplies. Ground settle at the bottom, though not always before reaching your cup. Some travellers add crushed eggshells to help clarify coffee when eggs are available. Others simply accept the grit. When real coffee runs low, roasted grains, chicory, roots, or other substitutes may be used. None completely convinces the drinker, but a warm, bitter cup at dawn can feel valuable even when the coffee bean has never met it. The beans continue to simmer. You skim foam from the surface and add dried onion. If pepper remains, a pinch goes in. Spices are treasured because they make repeated ingredients taste slightly less repeated. Salt must be used carefully. Preserved meat already contains plenty, and fresh water may be scarce. Food storage demands constant attention. Flour must stay dry. Bacon must be protected from animals. Sugar attracts moisture. Dried fruit can mould if packed poorly. Containers rub against one another as the wagon moves, creating small holes that release precious grains into corners. Trail specialists continue to dispute how monotonous emigrant diets truly became. Some journals describe endless repetitions of bacon, bread, and coffee. Others mention wild berries, fish, game, vegetables purchased along the route, and meals shared with nearby settlers. The difference may reflect season, wealth, route, luck, and the writer's willingness to describe ordinary food for your family. Winter narrows the menu. Fresh plants are rare. Hunting costs time and ammunition. Animals may be scarce or difficult to track when game is taken. The meat must be used quickly, frozen, dried, or smoked. Cold weather helps preserve food, but repeated freezing and thawing creates its own problems. The biscuits are turned. One is darker than the others. The youngest child claims it immediately, perhaps because it looks special. Nobody explains that it is special, mainly because you forgot it near the hottest part of the pan. At last, the meal is ready. The family gathers with bowls and cups. There is no dining table. You sit on crates, wagon tongues, folded blankets, or pieces of wood. Some remain standing because the ground is wet and every seat is occupied. The first spoonful warms your mouth. The beans are soft enough. The pork has flavoured the broth. The biscuit is smoky at the edge and dense in the middle. Nothing is luxurious, but everything is hot for a few minutes. Conversation slows. Eating becomes its own quiet task. Steam touches cold faces. Hands curl around tin cups. The fire paints moving light across tired clothing. Beyond the circle, animals breathe in the darkness. Afterward, the work continues. Grease is scraped from the pan. The kettle is rinsed with precious warm water. Leftovers are covered and placed where animals cannot reach them. Crumbs are gathered. Food scraps must not invite wildlife into camp. The fire burns lower. Its heat weakens almost as soon as the last dish is cleaned. The smell of beans, smoke, and bread lingers around the wagon, settling into coats and blankets. You return the kettle to its place among the cargo. Tomorrow it will melt ice, boil coffee, prepare another plain meal, and gather another layer of soot. For now, your stomach is full enough, your hands are warm enough, and the darkness beyond the fire seems slightly less severe. The warmth of the evening meal fades quickly, but thirst lingers in a quieter way. You notice it first as dryness at the back of your throat. The air inside the wagon is cold, yet it is also strangely parched. Every breath leaves your body carrying a little moisture. The scarf over your mouth grows damp and stiff, while your lips begin to crack beneath it. Snow surrounds the camp in every direction. But snow is not the same thing as ready water. Morning brings the same problem again. The cooking pot must be filled. Coffee requires water. Beans need soaking. Animals need far more than people do. Hands must be washed, wounds cleaned, and dishes rinsed. Even the smallest camp depends on a supply that is heavy, awkward, and always at risk of freezing. You lift the water bucket and find a thin plate of ice across its surface. The bucket was left near the wagon overnight. Protected from dirt but not from the temperature, you strike the ice gently with a spoon. It cracks into clear pieces that slide against the wooden sides. The water beneath is bitterly cold. You take a careful drink. The metal cup chills your fingers through the mitten. The water touches your teeth with a sharp ache. You swallow too quickly, then cough, which is not dignified, but does entertain a nearby child. A well-established reality of overland travel is that dependable water sources shaped routes, campsites, and daily distances, rivers, springs, creeks, and known wells could determine where a wagon train stopped. In winter, these sources did not disappear, but ice made access harder, and deep snow could hide banks, channels, or dangerous thin places. The men and older children walk toward a creek beyond the cottonwoods. You follow with a bucket in each hand. The trail is short, yet the empty containers strike your knees as you move. Snow squeaks beneath your boots. That sound tells you the cold is deep, the crystal dry and tightly packed. The creek is visible only as a narrow depression in the white ground. Ice covers most of it, near the bank. Someone has already broken a rough opening. The hole is dark and still. A long branch is used to test the edge before anyone steps closer. Ice can appear solid while hiding moving water beneath. Falling through near camp would be dangerous enough. Falling through while carrying heavy buckets and wearing layers of wool would turn inconvenience into emergency with remarkable speed. You kneel and dip the first container. Water rushes in, tugging the bucket sideways. Small pieces of ice knock against the rim. Your wrist aches from holding it steady. When you lift the bucket, water spills across one mitten. The wool darkens immediately, within moments. The outer fibers begin to stiffen. You switch hands. By the time both buckets are full, your shoulders already feel the return journey. Water weighs about 8 pounds for each gallon, and the family needs several gallons before breakfast is even considered. The animals will require much more. Carrying water is therefore not a small domestic task. It is repeated labour, performed in cold weather, across slippery ground. While trying not to lose half the load before reaching camp, you take slow steps. The water moves inside the buckets with a heavy rhythm. Each swing pulls against your arms. A little spills onto your boots. The leather shines briefly, then dulls as the moisture freezes. Back near the wagon, one bucket is placed beside the fire, the other is covered, if it remains too close to the flames. Soot and sparks may enter if it stays too far away. Ice forms again. Nothing about water is simple here. When no stream can be reached safely, snow must be melted. At first this seems wonderfully convenient. The entire landscape appears to be a water supply. You fill the kettle to the top with clean-looking snow and place it over the fire. The snow sinks. Within minutes, the full kettle contains only a small amount of liquid. More snow is added, it collapses as well. Then more follows. Loose snow contains a great deal of air. A pot that looks full may produce only a shallow pool. Melting enough for a family consumes time and fuel, both of which are already limited. There is another danger. If you place dry snow directly into a hot empty pot, it may scorch or produce an unpleasant taste before enough water forms. Experienced camp cooks often begin with a little liquid at the bottom, then add snow gradually. An unusual trail remedy for bland melted snow was to stir in a little tea, coffee, vinegar, molasses, or even toasted grain when such supplies remained. The goal was not elegance. Melted snow can taste flat because it contains little dissolved mineral matter, and any familiar flavour makes it easier to drink. Children are tempted to eat handfuls directly from the ground. This cools the mouth and appears efficient, but it can lower body temperature and does not provide as much water as expected. It also invites the question of what passed over that patch of snow before the child discovered it. You direct them toward a clean drift. They choose another patch anyway. Thirst in winter can be deceptive. You do not sweat as visibly as you would beneath a summer sun. Yet heavy clothing traps perspiration during work. Dry air pulls moisture from the lungs. Wind encourages faster breathing. The body continues losing water while the cold dulls the urge to drink. By midday, your head may ache, your mouth feels sticky. Fatigue deepens. It is easy to blame these sensations on the journey, the poor sleep, or the weather. Modern researchers recognize that dehydration remains a serious concern in cold environments. Even when people do not feel intensely thirsty, 19th century travellers did not describe the process with today's medical language, but many understood that warm drinks, soups, and regular access to water helped maintain strength. Questions remain among historians about how often emigrants knowingly managed winter dehydration rather than simply drinking whenever water became available. Diaries mention frozen containers, scarce fuel, foul streams, and weak travellers. But the exact role of insufficient water is difficult to separate from hunger, illness, exhaustion, and exposure. The animals make the need impossible to ignore. An ox may drink several gallons at a time, depending on work, feed, temperature, and size. Horses and mules also require regular water. Eating dry hay or grain increases the demand. You lead one animal toward the creek opening. It approaches cautiously, lowering its head, then drawing back when ice touches its muzzle. The surface must be cleared wider. Sharp edges can cut lips or legs. Several people work with poles and an axe, breaking pieces loose and pushing them beneath the solid sheet. The ox drinks at last. Its tongue disturbs the black water. Steam rises faintly from its nostrils. Another animal waits behind it, shifting with impatience. This process takes time, and every delay shortens the available daylight. Water stored in barrels presents further difficulties. A large container may freeze from the outside inward. Ice expands and can split weak wood or force out a stopper. Smaller vessels are easier to thaw but require more handling. Some families wrap containers in blankets or place them inside the wagon among supplies. Others keep water close to sleeping bodies, accepting the risk of leaks in exchange for a liquid breakfast. You can imagine the delight of waking beneath a wet blanket because someone failed to tighten a lid. By afternoon, the family begins rationing not because the landscape lacks snow, but because turning winter into drinkable water cost effort. Tea is shared. Stew provides liquid. Children are reminded to finish what remains in their cups. waste becomes painful to watch. A tipped bucket represents another journey to the creek. A cracked jug may mean losing both water and the container. A careless splash can freeze across a wagon step, creating a polished trap for the next person climbing down. As darkness returns, the kettle is filled once more. Some water will be used for supper, some will remain covered for morning. A small amount warms beside the fire for washing faces and hands. There is never enough for the kind of bath a modern listener might prefer, unless that listener enjoys standing naked beside an icy creek while several oxen observe. You drink before lying down. The water is smoky from the kettle and faintly flavoured by whatever cooked in it earlier. It is not refreshing in the modern sense. It is simply necessary. Outside, snow continues to fall with astonishing generosity inside the wagon. Every cup is guarded, every bucket covered, and every frozen drop reminds you that winter can surround you with water while still leaving you thirsty. The last cup of water disappears, and almost immediately the animals remind you that their needs are larger than yours. An ox stands beside the wagon with its head lowered, steam curling from its nostrils. Frost clings to the coarse hair along its muzzle. Its dark eye follows you without urgency. But the stillness is deceptive. This animal carries the journey in its shoulders. If it weakens, the wagon slows. If several animals weaken, the family stops. You approach with a bundle of feed. The ox turns slightly, and the wooden yoke creaks against the wagon tongue. You place the fodder where it can reach without tangling the harness. Its broad mouth gathers the dry stalks, and its jaw begins the patient circular motion that seems almost too calm for the cold around you. Oxen are commonly chosen for overland wagon travel because they are strong, steady, and often less expensive than horses. They can survive on rougher forage and are less likely to panic at unfamiliar sights. They are also slow, stubborn, and entirely capable of forming a personal opinion about every riverbank, hill, mud hole, and patch of snow. You soon learn that stubbornness is often caution, wearing an inconvenient face. The team studies the ground before stepping onto ice. It hesitates at steep slopes. It resists when the load feels wrong. Drivers may curse this behaviour, yet an animal sometimes detects danger before the humans do. You run your hand along the ox's shoulder. The hide feels warm beneath the winter coat, near the place where the yoke rests. The skin must be checked for rubbing and swelling. A small sore can deepen after hours of pulling. Hair may wear away. Moisture, dirt, and pressure irritate the wound. If the animal flinches beneath your touch, you pay attention. Padding can be adjusted, harness pieces can be cleaned, the load can be shifted, rest can be given, although rest always steals time from the road. A dependable truth of 19th century migration is that the health of draft animals often determined whether a family reached its destination. Wagons, tools, and provisions mattered greatly. But none of them moved without living power. Travellers lost animals to exhaustion, poor feed, disease, accidents, theft, and harsh weather. The wagon train may carry spare animals when families can afford them. A fresh ox can replace one that has become lame. A horse may be used for riding, scouting, or herding. Mules pull wagons as well, offering endurance and intelligence along with a reputation for expressing displeasure clearly. You lead a mule toward the water. It walks 3 steps, stops, and looks at you. You pull gently on the rope. The mule continues looking. There is no anger in its face, there is only judgment. After a pause long enough to establish that the movement is its own idea, it walks forward. Mules often tolerate heat and difficult terrain well, and they may require less feed than horses of similar working ability. They are sure-footed and alert, valuable qualities on the rough trails. Their intelligence, however, means they do not always obey a command they consider foolish. This can feel insulting until you realize the mule has just refused to step into a concealed hole. Horses bring speed and familiarity, especially for travelers accustomed to riding. They also need good feed, careful watering, and close attention to hooves. A poorly shod horse can become lame. Ice gathers beneath the hoof. Frozen ground jars the legs. Snow hides stones and broken branches. You lift one hoof carefully. The horse shifts its weight while you inspect the underside. Packed snow has formed a hard ball within the hoof, raising the foot unnaturally. You loosen it with a small tool, working slowly so you do not injure the softer tissue. The horse exhales against your shoulder. Its breath is warm and grassy. One curious practice mentioned in frontier accounts involves wrapping an animal's injured hoof or lower leg with cloth, leather, or even pieces cut from worn clothing. A ruined shirt might finish its useful life as a bandage for an ox. Nothing retires peacefully on the trail. Feeding becomes difficult when snow covers the grass. During warmer travel, animals may graze after the day's journey. Winter grazing is less reliable. Dry grass beneath shallow snow can sometimes be reached, but deep drifts hide it. Ice seals the ground. The little forage that remains may offer poor nourishment. Hay and grain take wagon space, so supplies are limited. Each feeding forces a choice between strength today and survival later. You break apart a frozen bundle of hay. The stalks are stiff and dusty. Seeds shake loose onto the snow. The animals crowd closer. And you spread the feed so stronger individuals do not take everything. An older ox pushes forward. A smaller one gives way. You guide the larger animal aside. Good teams develop order among themselves, and that order is not always gentle. Dominant animals control access to food and water unless people intervene. A weakened animal may become weaker simply because it is repeatedly pushed away. Researchers still dispute how much animal loss resulted from bad management compared with unavoidable and environmental hardship. Some travellers clearly overloaded wagons, rushed teams, or failed to provide sufficient rest. Others has cared carefully for their stock and still faced frozen forage, unexpected storms, poisonous plants, rough crossings, and disease. The surviving diaries often describe animals only when something goes wrong. An ox becomes lame, a horse disappears, a mule refuses a crossing. Everyday care receives less space. Even though it fills every morning and evening, you brush snow from the horse's back. Leaving wet snow against the coat can chill the animal as it melts. Sweat beneath harness also needs attention. After hard pulling, an animal must cool gradually. Removing gear too quickly in bitter wind may leave steaming skin exposed. You loosen the straps in stages. The horse shakes itself, sending small crystals into the air. A nearby child laughs and tries to catch them. Animals also need protection from wandering. At night, they may be tied, hobbled, guarded, or placed within a rough enclosure formed by wagons and rope. Bells help identify their movement. A missing sound can be as alarming as a sudden noise. You listen after darkness falls. The oxen breathe steadily. A mule stamps one hoof. A bell gives a soft note, then another. Somewhere farther out, a horse pulls at its tether. Predators are a concern. Though healthy adult livestock are not helpless, theft may worry travellers as much as wolves. A lost team can strand a family even if every person remains healthy. Someone takes the first watch. You sit near the fading fire with a blanket around your shoulders. The animals form dark shapes beyond the glow. Their bodies give off a warm, earthy smell mixed with leather, hay, and damp hair. The scene feels peaceful until one ox begins coughing. You stand and move closer. A cough may mean dust, cold air, strain, or illness. You listen for another. The ox lowers its head and returns to chewing. For now, there is no crisis. That phrase becomes a kind of comfort on the trail. For now, the hoof is sound. For now, The feed lasts for now. The team rises when asked. Morning will bring the yokes again. The animals will lean forward, muscles tightening beneath their coats. The wheels will resist, then turn, mile after mile. The wagon will follow their slow strength through snow and frozen mud. You may guide the journey, choose the route, measure the flour, and study the sky. But the truth walks in front of you on 4 tired legs. The animals decide how far home can move. The animals lean forward, the traces tighten, and the wagon begins another slow argument with the road. At first, the ground appears firm, snow lies thinly across a broad stretch of open country, and the morning cold has hardened yesterday's mud. The wheels roll with a steady crunch for perhaps 20 minutes. Everyone allows themselves the dangerous luxury of optimism. Then the front wheel drops. The wagon tilts sharply to one side. A crate shifts inside. Tin cups strike together. The youngest child gives a startled cry. While the driver calls to the team and pulls the animals to a stop, you hurry toward the wheel. Snow has hidden a rut left by earlier wagons. Beneath the white crust, the ground is not solid at all. It is a mixture of frozen edges, dark mud, and trapped water. The wheel has broken through and settled almost to the hub. You place both hands against the wagon side and push. Nothing happens. More people join you. Boots slide. Mud rises around the soles with a wet sucking sound. The oxen strain, their shoulders pressing into the yokes. The wagon moves half an inch, then slips back. Winter roads often change character within a single day. Frozen ground may support wagons in the morning, soften under weak sunlight by afternoon, then harden again after dark. Snow conceals ruts, rocks, holes, roots, and steep edges. A route that looks smooth can be far more dangerous than an openly rough one. You fetch a shovel. The mud beside the wheel must be cleared enough to create space. Each scoop is heavy, the upper layer is frozen. While the lower soil clings to the blade, you throw it aside, and some of it lands on your trousers. A child watches from a safe distance, deeply impressed by the amount of dirt now covering the adults. Branches are cut and pushed beneath the wheel. Stones may be added if any can be found. The goal is to give the iron rim something firm to grip. Rope is attached to help guide the wagon as the animals pull. Everyone takes a position. The driver calls to the oxen. The team leans forward. Wood creaks. Leather tightens. The buried wheel turns slowly, lifting mud in a thick, dark ring. You push until your arms tremble. Then the wheel climbs onto the branches. The wagon lurches free. No one cheers loudly because breath is too valuable, but several faces brighten. The success lasts only until you notice the rear wheel approaching the same rut. The wagon is guided sideways. This time, it passes. Such delays can consume an hour without carrying the family a single useful mile. Every obstacle steals daylight. And winter daylight is already brief. The road does not need to be completely blocked to become dangerous. It needs only to slow the train enough that darkness arrives before a safe camp is found. You walk onward, boots heavy with mud. The landscape begins to rise. A low ridge appears ahead, its slope covered with packed snow. The lead wagons stop while drivers inspect the climb. A hill that seems gentle from a distance can demand every ounce of strength from a team. Loads are checked. Some goods may be removed and carried by hand. Children walk, adults push. Extra animals may be hitched to one wagon at a time. Wheels can be blocked with stones or logs during pauses so the wagon does not roll backward. The first team begins climbing. The oxen lower their heads. Their hooves search for purchase. The wagon wheels slide sideways before catching again. Men walk beside the rear wheels with wooden blocks ready. You follow close behind. Halfway up, one ox slips. Its knee strikes the snow, and the wagon rolls backward several inches. A block is shoved beneath the rear wheel. The animal rises, shaking snow from its leg. Nobody rushes. The harness is adjusted. The team breathes. Steam gathers around their bodies. Then the climb resumes. Historical accounts of Western migration frequently describe steep grades where wagons were doubled with extra teams, pulled by ropes, or lowered carefully down slopes. Travellers sometimes dismantled part of a load and carried it separately. The wagon may look simple, but moving it across difficult ground requires planning, cooperation, and a surprising amount of rope. At the crest, the family discovers that going down can be worse than going up. Gravity becomes another animal in the team, and it has no training. A chain or heavy rope may be wrapped around a wheel to slow its turning, in some places. Drivers lock a rear wheel so it drags rather than rolls freely. Men hold ropes from behind. Everyone stays clear of the wagon's path. You look down the slope. The trail bends between trees. Snow has been polished by earlier traffic. One careless movement could send the wagon sideways. The descent begins. The locked wheel scrapes across the ground, leaving a deep groove. The wagon groans. The oxen step cautiously, holding back against the weight pressing from behind. You grip the rear rope. It pulls hard against your palms, even through mittens. The strain bites into your fingers. Your boots slide, recover, then slide again. For several long minutes there is nothing in the world except the rope, the wheels, and the next careful step. At the bottom, everyone stops. The wagon is intact, though one wheel now makes a new clicking sound. You kneel beside it. A wooden spoke has loosened where it joins the rim. Cold, moisture, and repeated shock can weaken these joints. Iron tires contract in low temperatures and expand with warmth. Wooden hubs dry, swell, crack, and shift. The wagon is always reacting to the weather. Repairs cannot wait. A loose spoke places greater strain on those beside it. If the wheel collapses farther from timber or help, the problem becomes far more serious. The family lifts the axle with a jack, lever, or improvised support, taking some weight from the damaged wheel. The wheel is removed. This is not a clean mechanical procedure in a bright workshop. Snow blows across the tools, grease stiffens. Small metal pieces threaten to disappear into the mud. Every exposed finger becomes numb. An uncommon but practical repair method involved soaking a loose wooden wheel in water, so the wood swelled and tightened around its joints. In freezing weather, this solution becomes complicated. Water may turn to ice before the repair is complete, and swollen wood can shrink again when it dries. Still, temporary success is often all the trail asks for. A strip of leather is used to secure the weakened area. A wedge is driven carefully into place. The wheel is fitted back onto the axle, followed by the retaining hardware. The new clicking sound becomes quieter, not gone, merely quieter. Students of migration continue to debate how many wagon failures came from poor construction and overloading. Compared with the unavoidable punishment of terrain and weather, cheap wood, hurried repairs, excessive cargo, and neglected grease certainly caused trouble. Yet even a well-built wagon could suffer after hundreds of miles of stone, mud, frost, and river crossings. The train moves again. Soon, another challenge appears. A frozen river crosses the route. Its surface looks broad and pale, marked by snow and dark lines. Some travellers argue that the ice is strong enough. Others insist that moving water has weakened it beneath the centre. A person walks ahead with a pole, striking the surface. The sound changes from a firm knock near the bank to a hollow note farther out. The wagons wait. Perhaps another crossing exists upstream. Perhaps the ice can be reinforced with brush and water. Perhaps the train must camp until colder weather thickens it. Every choice costs time. Today, caution wins. The wagons turn along the riverbank in search of safer ground. Wheels bump over roots and frozen clods. The repaired spoke holds. The animals continue, though their pace grows slower. By late afternoon, your body feels every rut as though you're part of the wagon. Your shoulders ache from pushing. Your hands remember the rope. Mud has dried in stiff patches on your clothes. The family has travelled only a few miles, yet the wagon remains upright. The wheel still turns. The team still pulls. As evening gathers over the frozen river, those facts feel almost luxurious. You choose a camp above the bank, block the wheels, and listen to the wood settle with tired little creaks. Tomorrow the road may soften, freeze, vanish beneath snow, or break something else, for tonight, at least. The wagon has survived the ground beneath it. The wagon survives the road. But the people inside it are beginning to feel less certain. That evening, as the family settles near the frozen river, the youngest child coughs again. It is not a dramatic sound, just a dry little interruption from beneath the blankets. Then another follows. The mother pauses while folding a coat, listening with the stillness of someone who has learned that small changes can matter. You listen too. The child's face looks pale in the lantern light. His nose is red from the cold, and his eyes seem heavy. Perhaps he is merely tired. Everyone is tired. Perhaps smoke from the fire irritated his throat. Perhaps the damp scarf he wore all day has chilled him. Perhaps it is the beginning of something worse inside the wagon. Illness has nowhere private to go. A feverish child lies beside flour sacks, tools, bedding, and other sleeping bodies. Every cough enters the shared air. Every cup is washed with limited water. Every blanket must serve several purposes. Isolation is nearly impossible when the shelter is barely wide enough for the family to turn around. You touch the child's forehead. It feels warmer than your hand, though your hand has been outside in the cold and cannot be trusted as a medical instrument. The mother presses her lips against his brow, a familiar method of judgment that may tell her more than a chilled palm. She asks whether his throat hurts. He nods. The medicine box is brought forward. It is small, carefully packed, and treated with more respect than many larger possessions. Inside may be laudanum, quinine, castor oil, camphor, mustard, herbs, bandages, needles, salves, and bottles whose labels have blurred from handling. Some remedies help. Some mainly create the feeling that something is being done. A few can be dangerous when doses are misunderstood. A central truth of 19th century overland travel is that infectious illness often killed more emigrants than accidents or violence. Cholera was especially feared during the Great Migration years, though winter camps also faced respiratory infections, dysentery, measles, influenza-like illnesses, and complications from exposure. The family does not know about bacteria and viruses in the modern sense. Germ theory is not yet part of everyday household knowledge for much of the period. People may blame bad air, foul water, weather, exhaustion, divine will, or an imbalance within the body. Some observations are accurate even when the explanation is not. Dirty water causes trouble. Crowded sleeping spreads coughs. Exhaustion weakens resistance. A wet body in cold wind can become dangerously chilled. You pour a little warmed water into a cup. Honey would soothe the throat, but none remains. Molasses may be used instead. A pinch of dried herb goes into the liquid, chosen because an older relative once trusted it. The child drinks slowly, outside. Snow scratches softly against the canvas. Another danger appears more quietly than fever. Your own toes have been numb for too long. You remove one boot and peel away the damp stocking. The skin is pale and waxy along two toes. You rub them instinctively. But the older woman beside you stops your hand. Rough rubbing can damage tissue that is already injured by cold. Gentle warming is safer. Though knowledge of frostbite treatment varies greatly from family to family, the foot is wrapped in dry cloth and held near warmth, not directly against the fire. Pain returns in sharp pulses. It feels like needles pushing inward beneath the skin. This is encouraging and miserable at the same time. If sensation returns, the injury may be mild. If the skin remains hard, white, or without feeling, the danger is greater. One peculiar remedy found in old domestic advice involved rubbing frozen skin with snow. The idea seems logical to people who fear warming the body too quickly. In reality, rubbing with snow can worsen damage. Still, the practice survives for generations because familiar remedies are difficult to question when no doctor is available. You sit with your foot wrapped, watching the child breathe. A deeper cough shakes him. The mother moves closer. She loosens the clothing around his neck and raises his head on a folded blanket. Steam from a pot may be used to moisten the air, though managing steam inside a cold wagon adds dampness to everything nearby. The lantern flame trembles. Medical care on the trail depends heavily on whoever has experience. A trained physician may travel with a wagon company, but many groups have none. A mother who has nursed several children, a former soldier, a midwife, or an older traveller may become the closest thing to a doctor. Knowledge passes through memory. Someone remembers what helped a fever years ago. Someone knows how to bind a wound. Someone has seen frostbite. Someone has delivered babies. Someone has buried a person after every remedy failed. The border between skill and guesswork is thin. Medical historians remain uncertain about how many recorded deaths from winter exposure were actually caused by a mixture of infection, dehydration, hunger, and exhaustion. Diary writers use broad terms such as fever, lung sickness, chills, or weakness. These descriptions tell us that people suffered, but not always exactly why. Sanitation makes everything harder. The family needs a place for bodily waste well away from camp and water sources. Frozen ground resists digging. Snow hides where others have already gone, during storms or illness. People may choose convenience over safety. Chamber pots or buckets can be used inside or near the wagon at night, then emptied later. This preserves modesty and prevents long walks through darkness. But it creates another unpleasant container that must be cleaned with scarce water. You suddenly appreciate the distance between a romantic painting and an actual winter camp. There is no glowing sunset in the painting's corner for the person scrubbing a sick child's bucket. Hands are rarely as clean as anyone would like. Soap is carried, yet washing in freezing water is painful. Warm water requires fuel. Towels remain damp. Shared utensils move from person to person. Even careful families struggle. The child begins to sweat. His hair sticks to his forehead. The mother changes the cloth beneath his head and pulls away one blanket so he does not become overheated. Fever creates a confusing balance. The body feels hot, the air is cold, and every adjustment seems too much in one direction. You watch the rise and fall of his chest. The wagon is unusually quiet. Children who usually whisper and fidget now remain still. The father stands outside longer than necessary, pretending to check the wheel while hiding his worry. Illness unsettles the entire family because everyone understands how quickly plans can change. A sick traveller may need to remain in the wagon during the day, displacing cargo and adding weight. The train may slow or stop. Supplies continue to shrink. Other families may fear contagion. Compassion and self-protection pull in opposite directions. No one says this aloud tonight. The mother reaches for a mustard plaster, a common household treatment for chest complaints. Mustard mixed into a paste can be spread on cloth and placed against the skin to create warmth and irritation. Left too long, it can burn. She checks the skin often. The child dislikes the smell. You do too. It fills the wagon with a sharp, bitter scent that joins wool, sweat, smoke, medicine, and damp canvas. Your toes begin to ache more strongly. The pale colour slowly gives way to pink. You flex them carefully beneath the cloth. Outside, the river ice gives a distant cracking sound. Everyone stops. Then the sound fades. The night continues. The child's fever does not vanish, but his breathing becomes steadier. He drinks another few swallows. The mother settles beside him and refuses to sleep. You offer to watch for a while. She shakes her head at first, then finally agrees, so you remain awake near the lantern, listening to the quiet camp and the soft cough beneath the blankets. The wagon walls hold no warmth of their own, yet the family gathers close, creating what comfort it can. By morning, someone may feel better, someone may feel worse. The trail does not pause for illness unless people force it to pause, and every such choice carries a cost. For now, you keep the cup nearby, the blankets dry, and the flame low. In a world without clinics, antibiotics, or easy answers, care becomes a form of endurance, measured in small sips, changed cloths, wakeful hours, and the steady presence of one person beside another. Care continues through the dark hours, and by dawn the child's fever has eased enough for the family to breathe a little more freely. Yet relief does not remove the work waiting beyond the blanket. The mother has scarcely slept. She rises before the others, touches the child's forehead again, then begins putting the wagon back in order. A damp cloth must be rinsed, bedding must be folded, the medicine bottle must be wrapped and returned to its box. Breakfast must be prepared, clothing repaired, water fetched, and the youngest children dressed. No one announces that these duties belong to her, they simply arrive. Women on the overland trails often carry a burden that is easy to miss when the story focuses on maps, rivers, wagons, and distant destinations. The wagon may move because animals pull it, but daily life moves because someone cooks, cleans, mends, nurses, remembers, comforts, and notices what everyone else has forgotten. You follow her outside. The cold catches the skin around your eyes. Smoke from the revived fire drifts low across the snow. She kneels beside the kettle and pours in yesterday's water, careful not to waste a drop while it warms. She checks the food stores. The flour sack feels lighter. The bacon slab is smaller. Dried apples remain, though not many. She does not need written calculations to understand the problem. Her hands have measured these supplies every day. She decides how much breakfast can be spared without making the evening meal too thin. This kind of arithmetic is rarely praised, yet the family depends upon it. A widely accepted feature of 19th century migration is that women performed much of the domestic labour in wagon camps while also walking long distances and helping with livestock, repairs, and emergencies. Their work did not stop when the wagon stopped, in many cases. The end of travel for the day marked the beginning of several more hours of cooking, washing, nursing, and preparation. You carry the water while she mixes cornmeal. A baby wakes inside the wagon and begins crying. An older girl climbs in, lifts the child, and wraps it in a shawl. She is perhaps 12 years old, though her responsibilities make her seem older. She rocks the baby while watching the fire. The mother turns the mush, checks the feverish boy, and reminds another child to find both mittens. Her attention moves constantly. Nothing receives all of it, yet nothing can be ignored. After breakfast, the washing begins. Laundry in winter is a punishment disguised as cleanliness. Clothes need washing because smoke, sweat, mud, food, and illness settle into every layer. Yet water must be carried and heated. Soap must be used carefully, and wet cloth must somehow dry in freezing air. You help fill the kettle again. A small amount of homemade soap is shaved into the hot water. It smells harsh and fatty. Shirts, stockings, cloths, and children's garments go in first. Heavy blankets are avoided unless absolutely necessary because they require too much water and take too long to dry. The mother pushes fabric beneath the surface with a stick. Steam rises around her face. Her hands redden whenever she reaches into the water. She wrings each piece firmly, twisting until her wrists ache. There is no convenient line strung across a warm room. Clothing hangs from wagon bows, ropes, bushes, and low branches in severe cold. Damp garments may freeze before they dry. A shirt stiffens in the wind. Its sleeves extend outward as though an invisible person is wearing it. One amusing detail appears in several frontier recollections. Frozen laundry could become so rigid that children stood trousers or shirts upright in the snow, turning necessary work into a brief game. The adults were less enchanted because every frozen garment still had to thaw before anyone could wear it. You lift a stocking from the line. It bends only slightly. The mother places it closer to the fire, but not close enough to scorch. Sparks rise without warning. One ember can burn a hole in cloth that required hours to wash and days to dry. While laundry hangs, sewing begins. A coat has split along one seam. A child's dress has torn near the hem. Two stockings need darning. A mitten requires another patch at the thumb. The sewing box opens on a folded blanket. Inside are needles, thread, pins, buttons, small scissors, scraps of cloth, and perhaps a thimble polished by years of use. These objects weigh very little, but losing them would be serious. You hold the coat while the mother threads a needle. Her fingers are rough and cracked. The needle passes through thick wool with effort. She pulls each stitch tight, creating a repair meant to survive wind, work, and another 100 miles. Women often carried knowledge that could not be packed into crates. They understood food preservation, childbirth, nursing, herbal remedies, clothing construction, and the management of limited supplies. This knowledge was not perfect, but it formed a practical system of survival. The older girl watches closely. She learns how far apart the stitches should be. She learns how to turn the fabric so the repair does not pull. She learns which scraps are too valuable to use on a hidden seam. The lesson happens without a school book. Later, the family's baby needs changing. The cloth must be washed and dried again. The sick child needs another drink. The kettle must be scrubbed. The morning dishes must be cleaned. A younger child begins crying because one boot hurts. The mother kneels to inspect the foot. A blister has formed where the stocking folded. She smooths the fabric, adds a soft scrap beneath the sore place, and loosens the boot. Such small acts prevent larger problems. A blister can become infected. A wet garment can chill a child. A missing button can expose skin. A skipped meal can weaken someone already tired. Experts continue to differ on how much authority women exercised within wagon trains beyond the household sphere. Some diaries show women influencing routes, departure times, camp choices, and decisions about sick relatives. Other records describe male leaders making formal choices while women carried the consequences. The balance varied by family, personality, circumstance, and the willingness of a diary keeper to notice women's judgment. You see authority expressed quietly here. The mother decides the feverish child should remain in the wagon. The father hesitates because the extra weight will burden the animals. She looks at him once. The child remains in the wagon. There is no speech, no vote. The decision settles like a lid on the kettle as the family prepares to leave. She packs the medicine where it can be reached quickly. She places dried cloths near the child. She checks the water cup and adds another blanket. Then she walks beside the wagon. This surprises you only until you remember that riding would add weight. Her body's exhausted, yet she keeps pace through the snow. The older girl carries the baby for a while. Later, the mother takes the child back. The baby's weight rests on one hip beneath the shawl. Her free hand gathers her skirt above the deepest drifts. At midday, there is no proper rest. The wagon stops briefly. She distributes cold biscuits and dried fruit. She checks the fever again. She repairs a strap with a strip of cloth. She helps gather fuel before the train moves on. The work changes shape but never disappears. By evening, her shoulders sag. Still, the fire must be made useful. Supper must be cooked. Wet socks must be placed near warmth. Children must be settled. Someone must listen to worries that grow louder after dark. One child asks whether they will reach a town soon. Another wants to know whether the abandoned chair is lonely. The mother answers both questions seriously. Perhaps that is part of the labour too, preserving a sense that the world remains understandable. She tells the children a story while stirring the pot. Her voice is quiet. The tale is familiar. One they have heard many times. But familiarity is exactly what they need. You sit nearby and watch the firelight move across her face. She's not presented as heroic within the camp. No one keeps a formal record of the number of meals she prepares, the wounds she binds, the shirts she mends, or the nights she spends awake. Yet the family would unravel without these acts. The wagon carries supplies, the animals carry the wagon, and she carries the daily life inside it. One cup, stitch, child, and quiet decision at a time. Her quiet story carries into the next morning, and the children wake with it still hovering somewhere between dream and memory for them. The journey is not a grand migration across a map. It is a chain of immediate things, cold fingers, a sore heel, a biscuit divided into equal pieces, the sound of adults whispering after they think everyone is asleep. You watch the youngest child sit upright beneath the blankets and blink at the pale canvas. For several seconds, he seems uncertain where he is. Then the wagon creaks. The smell of smoke reaches him, and the whole narrow world returns. He asks whether it has snowed again. It has. The older children are already moving. One rolls bedding, another searches for a cap beneath a flour sack. The oldest girl lifts the baby, checks the cloth around it, and steps carefully over the packed supplies. Childhood on the trail leaves little space for being useless. Even young children receive tasks. They gather small sticks, watch kettles, carry cups, fetch cloth, lead gentle animals, hold tools, and keep younger siblings away from wheels and fires. A child may not understand the destination, but the child understands that everyone must help. A firmly established point in overland history is that children made up a large part of many emigrant parties. Families moved west together, and diaries often describe children walking beside wagons, helping in camp, becoming ill, getting lost, playing games, and adapting to conditions that would exhaust many adults. You walk beside a boy who carries a bundle of kindling against his chest. The sticks are light, but the bundle blocks his view. He trips over a frozen rut, falls to one knee, then looks around to see whether anyone noticed. Everyone noticed. No one laughs. He rises with exaggerated dignity and continues. The children learn the ground quickly. They know which patches of snow hide mud. They know not to stand behind a frightened mule. They know that wagon wheels can crush a careless foot. They know where the fire is hottest and which adult is most likely to share a dried apple. Their education is practical, constant, and sometimes severe. Formal lessons do not necessarily disappear. A family may carry a Bible, primer, arithmetic book, slate, or a few treasured school texts. On quiet evenings, an older child reads aloud. A mother asks spelling words while stirring supper. Numbers are practiced by counting biscuits, animals, miles, or remaining sacks of flour. You sit near the fire while a girl traces letters on a slate. Her mitten makes the chalk difficult to hold, so she removes it. Within moments, her fingers redden. She writes one word, rubs a hand against her sleeve, then writes another. The lesson is brief. Cold has its own curriculum. The adults may speak of Oregon, California, a farm, a town, or land waiting beyond the mountains. Younger children imagine these places in fragments. Perhaps the new home has apple trees. Perhaps there is a school. Perhaps grandmother will somehow be there, even though everyone has explained that she remained behind. Distance is hard for a child to understand when every day looks like more road. Boredom settles in despite the danger and novelty. The wagon moves slowly, the same wheels turn, the same animals sway, snow, grass, bare trees, and grey sky repeat for hours. Children invent games from whatever remains available. They count birds. They search for unusual stones. They guess which wagon will reach the next bend first, though all wagons move at nearly the same speed. They make dolls from scraps of cloth, corn husks, carved sticks, or rolled stockings. Buttons become game pieces. Pebbles serve as marbles. A hoop, when one survives the journey, can entertain a child for astonishing distances. One curious amusement mentioned in Pioneer Recollections involved children collecting dried buffalo dung not only for fuel, but occasionally shaping or stacking the pieces during play before adults carried them to the fire. A modern nursery might prefer painted wooden blocks. The plains offered a more practical toy box. You watch two boys build a small fort from frozen clods and fuel chips. They defend it from an imaginary army. Later, the entire fort warms the coffee. Children also create songs to match their steps. The words change constantly. A rhyme begins with an ox, moves to a missing mitten, insults someone's cooking very gently, and ends with everyone forgetting the first line. Adults pretend not to listen. Fear appears without warning. A wheel slips near a slope, and the children fall silent. A wolf calls beyond the camp, and the youngest move closer to the fire. Someone becomes ill, and questions begin. Will he get better? Why are we stopping? Are we lost? The adults choose answers carefully. Too much truth may frighten. Too little invites imagination, which can be worse. You hear a mother say that the road is difficult, but the family knows what to do. This is not entirely true. It is true enough for the moment. Researchers remain divided over how deeply the migration experience marked children later in life. Some adult recollections describe the trail as a great adventure filled with animals, open space, and family closeness. Others remember hunger, death, fear, and exhausting labour. Memory softens some events, sharpens others, and often changes with age. The children beside you do not know they are creating future memories. They are simply cold now. A little girl has lost feeling in one hand because her mitten is wet. An older sibling places the hand beneath a coat and warms it against the body. The girl complains, then begins to cry when sensation returns painfully. No one scolds her. Another child grows quiet from fatigue. He walks more slowly until an adult lifts him into the wagon, placing him beside the recovering boy. The cargo is shifted to make space for a while. The two children lie among blankets and sacks. The wagon movement rocks them, not gently, but rhythmically enough. They whisper. One claims that a barrel contains candy. The other knows it contains flour but allows the story to continue. At camp, children help collect fuel before play resumes. They bring thin branches, bark, and whatever dry material they can find. The oldest children may carry water, help yoke animals, prepare food, or stand watch over younger ones. Girls are often assigned domestic work earlier and more consistently than boys. They cook, sew, wash, nurse babies, and learn the same exhausting routines performed by their mothers. Boys may herd stock, gather wood, handle tools, or assist with wagons, yet necessity blurs these divisions. Whoever is available does what must be done. You see the older girl kneeling beside the baby while also stirring a pot. She hums beneath her breath. The melody is the same one her mother used the previous night. The younger boys scrape snow from beneath the wagon. One discovers a lost spoon and announces the find as if he has uncovered buried treasure. For several minutes, everyone's mood improves. Small discoveries matter: a bright feather, a patch of dry ground, a sweet piece of dried fruit, a story told twice, a rabbit track leading into brush. The children notice details adults overlook because adults are busy measuring danger. After supper, the oldest boy asks how many miles remain. No one gives a direct answer. Distance depends on weather, animals, rivers, repairs, and luck. Saying a number might create hope that the road will later break, so the father says they are closer than yesterday. The boy considers this. It is enough. The children settle into their places. One curls beside a sack, another rests against a folded coat. The baby sleeps near the mother's chest. Before the lantern goes out, the little girl with the warmed hand asks for the story again. The mother begins from the same opening, outside. Snow gathers against the wheels, inside. The children listen, not because the tale is new, but because it remains the same. In a life where the road changes daily and adults cannot promise what comes next, repetition becomes its own shelter. Their eyes close one by one. Tomorrow they will walk, work, complain, laugh, learn, and grow older by another difficult day. For now, they sleep beneath the canvas, carrying fear lightly because the adults carry the heavier part. The familiar story ends. The lantern goes dark, and the wagon seems to shrink around you. During the day, the trail is filled with visible difficulties. You see the slope, the frozen river, the tired ox, the loose wheel, and the child limping beside the wagon. At night, sight loses its authority. Sound takes over. You lie beneath the blankets and listen. The first noise comes from the canvas. Wind presses against one side of the cover, drawing the cloth inward between the wooden bows. Then it releases. The fabric answers with a low snap, followed by a soft trembling that moves from front to back. A moment later, it happens again. You know what causes it, yet your body remains alert. Darkness makes every ordinary sound seem like the beginning of something larger. The wagon boards creak as the temperature falls, wood contracts in the cold, iron fittings tighten, a rope rubs against the frame with a slow, dry whisper. Somewhere near your feet, a tin cup touches the side of a pot. Once, then twice. You wait for a third tap. It does not come. Outside, the livestock shift within their tethers. An ox exhales heavily. A horse stamps at the snow. The mule gives a brief snort, as though it has detected some personal insult in the darkness. The animals are easier to understand than the sounds beyond them. Farther away, something moves through brush. You hear a branch bend, a faint scrape, and then silence. It may be a rabbit. It may be a deer. It may be another traveller moving near camp. Your imagination, being fully rested compared with the rest of you, immediately suggests several less comforting possibilities. Night watches were a common precaution in many wagon companies. Travellers guarded livestock, watched fires, listened for approaching strangers, and checked weather conditions. The exact arrangement varied, but larger groups often divided the hours so that at least one person remained awake while others slept. Tonight, your turn comes before midnight. A hand touches your arm beneath the blanket. You wake from shallow sleep and crawl toward the wagon opening. Cold air pours inside as you lift the flap. The camp has changed. Wagons sit as pale shapes beneath starlight. Fires have faded into red pockets within dark ash. Snow reflects enough light for you to see the nearest animals. But beyond them, the world becomes a wall of blue and black. You pull your coat tighter and step down. The first breath hurts your lungs. Your boots crunch across the frozen surface. Every step sounds far too loud. You pause beside the fire and add one small piece of fuel, careful not to create a blaze that wastes wood or sends sparks toward the canvas. The flame rises briefly. Faces do not appear around it. Everyone else remains hidden beneath blankets, wagon covers, tents, or coats. You sit on an overturned bucket. The cold enters from below almost immediately. A night guard does not need to stare dramatically into the wilderness every second. Much of the work is waiting, listening, and trying not to fall asleep. You check the ropes, you walk among the animals, you look for embers carried by the wind. You study the clouds and wonder whether they are thickening. Then you return to the bucket and discover it has not become warmer in your absence. A wolf calls somewhere beyond the trees. The sound is long and thin, rising into the open sky. Another answers from much farther away, inside one wagon. A child wakes and whispers a question. An adult murmurs reassurance. Wolves were present across much of the country travelled by emigrants. But healthy groups of people and large campfires usually discouraged close approaches. Livestock, especially young, injured, or wandering animals, faced greater risk. Coyotes also produced cries that unsettled travellers, and unfamiliar listeners did not always identify the animal correctly. You hear another call. This one breaks into several notes, almost like laughter. The mule raises its head. You stand and walk toward it, speaking softly before touching the rope. The animal's ears turn toward your voice. Its body remains tense for a moment, then settles. The darkness beyond the mule remains unchanged. One peculiar feature of night on the trail is how often ordinary objects imitate danger. A loose hide can resemble a crouched person. A shrub becomes a wolf. A hanging coat moves like someone approaching the wagon. Moonlight turns a barrel into a silent watcher with excellent patience. You stare at a dark shape near the second wagon. It appears taller than before. You take 2 careful steps toward it. The shape moves. Your heart tightens. Then an ox lifts its head, revealing that the threatening figure is simply its horn and shoulder seen from an unfortunate angle. You feel mildly betrayed. Not every worry comes from animals. Strangers may approach camp seeking directions, food, trade, company, or shelter. Most meetings are ordinary. Some are welcome. A lone rider might bring news about the road. A nearby family could share fuel or medicine. Yet darkness encourages suspicion, especially when supplies are low and everyone is tired. A distant point of light appears between the trees. You stand still. It flickers, disappears, then returns. Another campfire, perhaps. The wagon train leader wakes and joins you. He studies the light without speaking. There is no immediate reason for alarm. Other travellers often follow the same rivers and routes. Still, knowing that unknown people are nearby changes the feeling of the night. The fire beyond the trees remains distant. No one approaches. Writers who study trail communities continue to disagree about how dangerous the average night camp truly was. Some later accounts emphasize attacks, predators, theft, and constant fear. Many surviving diaries describe quieter concerns, such as wandering cattle, sudden weather, illness, sparks, and the ordinary misery of cold. Dramatic incidents occurred, but long stretches of waiting filled far more hours. Waiting can be tiring in its own way. You pace around the wagon line. Snow begins to fall, almost too lightly to see. You notice it when small crystals touch your cheeks. The stars blur. The distant light vanishes. The weather has hidden the strangers, or perhaps hidden your camp from them. A rope creaks near the horses. You inspect the knot and find it loosening. The animal has been rubbing against the line. You tighten it with stiff fingers and check the others. A missing horse at dawn could delay everyone. A wandering ox might follow the trail backward. A frightened mule could pull loose and carry valuable tack into the darkness. The animals must therefore be listened to as carefully as they are watched. A sudden burst of movement may mean a predator, a stranger, slipping ice, or nothing more than one impatient animal disturbing the rest. The camp contains its own language. Steady chewing means calm. Soft stamping means cold or irritation. A sharp snort means attention. A chorus of movement means you should stand up quickly. Near the river, ice cracks with a deep booming note. The sound rolls beneath the ground. You feel it through your boots before it fades into the trees. River ice expands, contracts, and shifts as temperature changes. The noises can resemble distant gunfire, falling timber, or thunder. To someone unfamiliar with frozen rivers, the sound is deeply unsettling. You wait. Another boom follows. Farther away, nothing breaks near camp. The snow grows thicker. It settles on your shoulders and gathers along the wagon wheels. You brush it from the firewood and place another small piece on the embers. Warmth touches your hands for only a moment. Your watch nears its end. The next person emerges from beneath a blanket, blinking and unhappy. You report the loose rope, the distant fire, the wolves, and the changing weather. He nods. No crisis has occurred. Again, this feels like success. You climb back into the wagon and lower the flap. The interior air is stale but warmer than the night outside. Someone shifts to make room. As you settle beneath the blanket, the sounds continue. Canvas breathes, wood murmurs, an animal stamps. Ice speaks beneath the distant river. Yet the noises no longer seem separate. They blend into a rough winter lullaby, surrounding the wagon without entering it. You close your eyes. Beyond the firelight, the world remains wide, cold, and mostly unseen, inside. Breathing bodies gather close beneath the canvas, while the night keeps watch in its own language until morning. Morning arrives beneath a sky the colour of cold iron, and the camp wakes not as a collection of separate families, but as a small moving society. Every wagon belongs to someone, every animal has an owner, every sack of flour has been measured against hunger, yet the road ahead belongs to all of you, and no family can manage every crossing, repair, illness, or storm alone. This is where cooperation becomes necessary. It is also where cooperation becomes difficult. You hear the first disagreement before breakfast. One driver wants to leave quickly. While the ground remains frozen and firm, another insists that the sick child needs more rest. A third family has not found one of its oxen. Someone else points toward the clouds and says snow is coming. Voices rise around the fire. No one is shouting yet, but everyone is moving closer to it. A wagon train often chooses a captain or another recognized leader before setting out. The position sounds impressive, though it offers little of the comfort associated with modern authority. The captain may guide camp arrangements, settle disputes, organize watches, select routes, and coordinate difficult crossings. He cannot simply command the weather, repair every wheel, or make exhausted people agree. Leadership depends heavily on consent. A family can leave the train if it rejects a decision, though travelling alone carries greater risk. Several families may split away and form another company. People join, separate, and join again as conditions change. The captain stands beside the lead wagon now. He is tired, unshaven, and wrapped in a coat patched at one elbow. He listens while each person explains why their concern should come first. The missing ox matters because a wagon cannot move without it. The frozen road matters because afternoon thaw may trap everyone. The sick child matters because travel could worsen the fever. The weather matters because a storm may make movement dangerous. Everyone is correct. This is not helpful. A common feature of organised wagon companies was the creation of written or spoken rules before departure. These might address leadership, daily travel, livestock, guard duty, camp sanitation, property, discipline, and assistance during emergencies. Some groups drew up formal constitutions, revealing how seriously travellers treated the challenge of governing themselves far from established institutions. You can imagine the meeting months earlier. People gather in a town or riverside camp, clean and hopeful, discussing rules beneath pleasant weather. They agree that every man will take his turn at guard duty. They promise to help with repairs. They approve penalties for neglecting animals or delaying the train. Then winter arrives, and every rule meets exhaustion. The missing ox is found among willows near the river. Its bell had become packed with ice, muting the sound. Two boys lead it back, proud of their success and careful not to mention that they followed the tracks, only after arguing about which direction the animal had gone. The captain decides that the train will leave after a brief delay. The sick child remains inside the wagon. Two families offer to redistribute part of the load so the animals pulling that wagon do not tire as quickly. A flour sack moves into one wagon. A tool chest moves into another. This generosity creates problems of its own. People must remember who owns what. Goods can be damaged. Families may later disagree about whether something was lent, traded, or given. A simple act of help can produce an argument several days later when hunger makes everyone's memory unusually selective. You lift one side of the tool chest. Another man takes the opposite handle. Together you carry it through the snow. The chest is heavier than expected. Halfway to the next wagon, he loses his grip. The box drops, the lid opens, and several tools scatter. No one is injured still. The owner reacts as though a personal betrayal has occurred. He kneels quickly, gathering files, chisels, a hammer, and a small saw. He accuses the other man of carelessness. The other man points out that he was helping for free. The owner says that poor help is worse than none. The helper says something about carrying the chest back alone. For a few moments, the future of the wagon train seems likely to be decided by a hammer lying in the snow. Then an older woman steps forward, picks up the hammer, brushes it clean, and places it inside the chest. She says the storm will not care which man was right. The argument ends, though not because either man has changed his mind. Conflict often grows from small events because the real pressure comes from somewhere else. Hunger, fear, cold, poor sleep, damaged property, and uncertainty sharpen every word. A missing spoon becomes evidence of disrespect. A delayed departure becomes proof that one family is selfish. A careless animal becomes an attack on everyone's survival. You have heard the same complaints before. That wagon always falls behind. That man never takes his full watch. Those children steal fuel. That family uses too much water. The captain must sort genuine danger from ordinary irritation. One less familiar detail in wagon company records is the occasional use of fines for breaking agreed rules. A person who neglected guard duty, frightened livestock, or violated camp regulations might owe money, supplies, or labour. Collecting such penalties was another matter. A rule has limited force when the guilty party controls the wagon containing the bacon. The train finally begins moving. Wagons fall into order, though the order changes from day to day. The lead position is valuable because the first wagon travels over untouched ground. It is also demanding because the lead driver must find the route and test uncertain places. Families may rotate positions to distribute the burden. This too creates arguments. A driver who believes another family has remained at the front too long may demand a change. Someone whose animals are weak may prefer the smoother track left by earlier wagons. Dust makes rear positions unpleasant in summer. Winter replaces dust with churned mud and broken snow. Today your wagon travels near the middle. You follow wheel marks already pressed into the ground. This makes navigation easier, but deepens the ruts. The oxen pull steadily as voices drift between wagons. News moves along the line. The river crossing ahead may be unsafe. A horse has gone lame. One family has spare coffee. Another needs lamp oil. Trade begins during a midday stop. A woman offers sewing work in exchange for dried fruit. A man trades a small amount of tobacco for axle grease. Someone lends a chain with the understanding that it must be returned before the next steep descent. Not every exchange requires payment. A family shares medicine with the sick child. Another provides warm broth. Hospitality survives because everyone knows they may need the same kindness tomorrow. Yet generosity has limits. Supplies are shrinking. A family that shares too freely may later lack food for its own children. Refusing a request creates guilt. Accepting too often creates resentment. Researchers continue to examine whether cooperation in wagon trains was driven mainly by shared values or practical necessity. Personal letters often describe deep friendships and acts of sacrifice. Other records reveal division, exclusion, accusation, and families abandoned after disputes. Both realities can exist within the same company. People help because they care. People help because they need help in return. Usually, the motives are mixed. In the afternoon, the train reaches a narrow slope beside the river. Only one wagon can pass at a time. The captain assigns people to guide wheels, hold ropes, and manage the animals. No family can cross alone safely. The man who dropped the tool chest takes a rear rope. The chest owner stands beside him. Neither speaks. When the wagon begins descending, both pull together. Their boots slide at the same moment. They recover without releasing the rope. At the bottom, the owner gives a small nod. The other man returns it. This is not friendship, but it is enough. As daylight fades, the group selects a sheltered camp. Wagons are placed to break the wind. Livestock are gathered. Guard turns are assigned. One man protests that he stood watch the previous night. Someone checks the written list. He is correct. Another person takes the turn. Rules don't remove disagreement, but they give the disagreement somewhere to end. You sit near the fire as food passes between families. A child receives a dried apple from a neighbour. A woman carries broth toward the sick wagon. Two men repair a shared rope without discussing who damaged it. Around you, the wagon train feels fragile. It could divide over pride, hunger, fear, or a careless word. It could also hold together through a storm because one person shares fuel, another watches the animals, and someone else quietly picks a hammer from the snow before an argument grows. The road demands more than endurance from each traveller. It demands the much harder skill of enduring one another. The skill of enduring one another becomes more important when the snow thickens before dawn and refuses to stop. At first, the storm seems ordinary. A few flakes settle on the wagon cover. Wind moves through the trees with a low, steady breath. The animals stand close together, their backs whitening slowly. Someone brushes snow from a wheel and says the sky may clear by noon, by breakfast. The distant ridge has vanished. The river disappears next. Soon you can no longer see the final wagon in the line. Travel is impossible. The captain walks from family to family, bending against the wind. His coat flaps around his legs, and snow gathers in his beard. The decision is simple, though its consequences are not. The train will remain where it is. Every wagon must be secured. Every animal must be sheltered as well as the ground permits. Food, fuel, and patience must be rationed without knowing how long the storm will last. You pull another rope across the canvas covering. The wind presses against the wagon broadside, making the wooden frame shudder. Snow does not fall gently now. It races sideways, striking your face like dry grains of sand. You turn your back to it and work by touch. The ropes are tied to strong points along the wagon bed. Loose sections of canvas are tightened. The front and rear openings are closed as much as possible, though completely sealing the wagon would trap damp air and smoke. Snow must be cleared from the roof repeatedly. A light layer seems harmless, but accumulating snow grows heavy. Wet snow is especially dangerous. It can stretch the canvas, bend the bows, and place strain on the whole frame. You reach upward with a broom and push along the outer curve. A thick sheet slides from the roof and lands down the back of another man's coat. He freezes in place. You apologize. He says nothing for several seconds, then announces that your technique lacks refinement. The storm takes the comment away before it can become an argument. Accounts from winter emigrant camps show that prolonged halts could be as dangerous as difficult travel. Families stopped moving, but they continued consuming flour, meat, fuel, and animal feed. A delay of several days could destroy calculations made for an entire route. The wagon train therefore begins counting. How many sacks of flour remain? How much bacon? How many days of grain for the horses? How much dry wood can be gathered without sending anyone too far from camp? Answers vary from wagon to wagon. One family prepared carefully and still has several weeks of provisions. Another has been sharing with a sick relative and now owns less than expected. A third discovered moisture inside a flour barrel, spoiling part of the contents. The damaged flour smells sour. The top layer is grey and clumped. Someone removes what can be saved, spreading the usable portion near gentle warmth to dry. Nothing is discarded until everyone agrees it is beyond hope. Meals become thinner, beans receive more water, biscuits become smaller. Bacon appears as flavour rather than a proper serving. Coffee weakens until it seems mainly like warm water that once heard a story about coffee. Children notice immediately. They ask why the biscuits are smaller. An adult explains that everyone is less active while waiting. This is clever and completely unconvincing. The animals create the greater worry. Snow covers the nearby grass. Hay is limited. Grain must be reserved for the horses and mules that depend upon it most. Oxen may eat rougher forage, but even they cannot live on optimism and frozen brush. You lead 2 oxen toward a sheltered hollow behind the trees. The wind is weaker there. Men cut branches and scrape away snow, exposing dry grass beneath. The animals lower their heads and begin searching. Every mouthful matters. A rarely mentioned winter practice involved feeding livestock twigs, bark, or branches from certain trees when normal forage disappeared. Cottonwood and willow could provide emergency material. Though such feed offered limited nourishment and was never an ideal replacement for hay, axes sound through the storm. The blows are dull because snow absorbs the sharper echoes. Branches fall, disappear briefly into drifts, then are dragged back toward camp. Fuel and fodder compete for the same wood. A branch can warm people in the fire or offer something for an animal to chew. The family must decide which need is more urgent. Inside the wagon, dampness becomes its own weather. 6 people breathing beneath closed canvas produce moisture. Wet mittens hang from the boughs. Snow melts from boots. Frost forms along the interior during the night, then softens whenever the lantern or a warmed stone raises the temperature. Droplets fall onto bedding. Blankets must be turned and aired during brief pauses in the storm, otherwise they grow heavier and colder. A damp quilt provides less insulation and carries a smell that settles into every corner. You squeeze into the wagon beside the recovering child. The interior is crowded because more supplies have been moved inside for protection. Flour, medicine, clothing, and fire-starting materials must remain dry. Tools occupy the spaces where knees might otherwise go. Outside, the wind gives a sudden howl, the wagon rocks, everyone becomes still. A wheel block has shifted beneath the snow. You climb out with two others and feel your way along the wagon side. The storm erases landmarks so completely that a person can become disoriented within a few yards. A rope has been stretched between wagons for safety. You keep one hand on it while moving. The block is replaced and reinforced with another piece of wood. Snow gathers around the wheels, which may help anchor the wagon. But drifting against one side also adds pressure. You clear enough to keep the frame balanced. Questions persist among scholars about how frequently winter trapped entire wagon companies for long periods. Since personal diaries often record weather unevenly, and later memoirs sometimes compress several storms into one dramatic memory. What is clear is that even a short halt could become severe when food, fuel, and livestock were already strained. The second day begins without sunrise. The sky merely changes from black to dark grey. No one suggests moving, tempers shorten. A child cries because another child touched a cloth doll. Two men argue about firewood ownership. A woman accuses a neighbouring family of allowing their dog near the food stores. The dog sits nearby looking innocent and not remotely trustworthy. Crowding removes distance from irritation. There's nowhere to walk alone. No quiet room exists. Every complaint enters the same narrow shelter and remains there. You step outside whenever the wind eases, simply to breathe air that does not smell of wet wool, onions, and human frustration. Small repairs fill the waiting hours. A torn harness is stitched with heavy thread. A cracked box receives a wooden brace. Axe handles are inspected. Socks are darned. Mittens are patched. Snow is melted. The fire is fed carefully. Idleness is dangerous because it allows fear to grow without competition. Work gives the hands somewhere to place it. The captain visits again and discusses the route. Should the train remain sheltered until the storm fully passes? Should scouts search for better ground? Could the river ice support wagons once visibility improves? Would moving save supplies? Or spend more energy than the animals can afford? No choice offers certainty. The older travellers study the wind. Hunters examine the snow. People who have crossed winter country before describe signs they trust, though they do not always agree. One says the pressure is changing, another says the wind has shifted, a third says his knee aches, which he considers equally valuable evidence. By the third morning, the snowfall weakens. The world outside is almost smooth. Wagons appear half buried. Ropes rise from drifts and disappear again. The animals stand in hollows trampled into the snow. Sunlight finally reaches the canvas as a faint yellow patch. Everyone emerges. The silence after the storm feels enormous. There is no cheering. The danger has not passed simply because the snow has stopped. The road is hidden. Drifts fill the low ground. Animals are tired from cold and poor feeding. Scouts travel a short distance on foot. They return with mixed news. The route ahead is difficult but visible. The riverbank is buried. A stand of trees lies several miles farther on and may offer better fuel. The captain calls the families together. Some want to leave immediately. Others want one more day for the animals to recover. The discussion is quieter than the earlier argument. Hunger has made everyone serious. At last. The train agrees to remain until morning, then attempt the road while the snow surface is firm. The final day of waiting becomes preparation. Loads are lightened. Anything damaged beyond the use is examined once more. A broken chair leg, spare crate, and cracked wooden frame become fuel. Food is divided for the morning. Ropes are laid where they can be reached quickly. You brush snow from the wagon cover again. The canvas rises beneath your hand. intact after the storm. Inside, the family settles close. Supper is thin, but hot. The children receive equal portions. The recovering boy manages a smile. Outside, the animals chew the last of the cut branches. No one knows whether leaving is wiser than staying. That uncertainty follows every choice on the trail. Yet the storm has passed. The supplies have not vanished, and the wagon remains upright beneath the clearing sky. For tonight, waiting has done its work. Tomorrow, movement must begin again. Morning arrives clear and pale, with a thin band of gold resting above the eastern trees. For several moments, nobody moves. The quiet feels too complete after days of wind. Snow lies across the camp in broad, smooth shapes, softening the wagons, the tree roots, the fire pits, and the tracks left by restless animals. Frost shines along every rope. The canvas above you glows faintly as sunlight reaches it. Then an ox gives a deep, impatient breath, and the camp returns to life. You climb from the wagon and place both boots into snow that reaches nearly to your knees. The surface holds for an instant, then collapses beneath your weight. Cold powder slides inside one boot. Winter offers a final greeting. The fires are revived. Water is warmed. The remaining food is divided carefully. Breakfast consists of thin cornmeal, a little bacon flavour, and coffee so weak that it seems almost embarrassed to be present. Nobody complains. The road is waiting. Before departure, scouts move ahead with poles and shovels. They search for the old trail beneath the snow, studying shallow depressions, broken branches, and the faint rise of buried ruts. What appears to be level ground may hide a ditch. What appears to be a safe white slope may cover ice. The first wagon moves slowly. Its wheels press deep lines into the snow. The oxen strain, pause, then continue. Adults walk beside the wheels with shovels ready. Children follow in the packed track, placing their feet where larger boots have already broken the surface. Your wagon takes its turn. The animals lean into the yoke. The wooden frame creaks. For a few seconds, nothing happens. Then the front wheels climb from their frozen hollows. The wagon rolls forward. Everyone exhales together. The journey is not suddenly easy. Drifts block low ground. Hidden branches catch beneath the axle. Snow gathers against the wheels, forcing frequent stops. Yet the sky remains clear, and the wind has weakened to a light breath. Sunlight touches your face. You almost feel warmth. One broadly recognized pattern of 19th century overland travel is that many emigrants planned their departures and routes to avoid severe winter conditions. Spring and summer offered longer daylight, grazing for animals, and open river crossings. Those caught in winter faced greatly increased risks from hunger, exposure, weak livestock, and isolation. Your family has learned those risks one ordinary day at a time. They are not contained in one dramatic moment. They live in the damp stocking that never dries, the water bucket that freezes overnight, the flour sack that grows lighter, the child who coughs beneath shared blankets, the wheel that cracks far from help, the ox that lowers its head and pulls anyway. By midday, the snow begins to soften under the sun. Water drips from bare branches. Tiny dark patches of ground appear near exposed stones. The children notice first. One points toward a line of water running beneath the wagon track. Another removes a mitten and holds out a hand to catch droplets falling from a branch. The mother tells the child to put the mitten back on. Hope does not prevent numb fingers. The train reaches the stand of trees reported by the scouts. There is dry wood beneath fallen trunks, and the ground slopes enough to avoid the deepest drifts. The animals find patches of exposed grass near the southern side of the grove. A brief halt is called. You sit on a log and feel sunlight through your coat. It is weak, But after the storm it seems generous. Around you, families inspect their wagons and animals. The repaired spoke remains firm. The sick child steps outside for the first time in several days. He is pale and wrapped in too many layers, but he stands on his own. His mother keeps one hand near his shoulder without touching him. He looks across the snow and says it is bright. Everyone smiles as though he has delivered important news. A small curiosity recorded in some emigrant memories is the excitement caused by the first signs of seasonal change. A patch of green grass, running water beneath ice, or the return of a familiar bird could lift an entire camp's spirits after weeks of white ground. Even mud might appear beautiful for several minutes. You will soon remember that mud has its own ambitions. For now, the thaw feels like mercy. Water begins dripping from the wagon cover. Snow slides from the curved roof in soft, heavy folds. The canvas darkens where moisture spreads, and everyone knows it must be dried when possible. Winter is loosening its grip, but it leaves work behind. Blankets need airing, harness must be cleaned, food stores must be counted, boots require grease, the animals need rest and better forage. There is no single moment when hardship ends and comfort begins. Cold nights may return, rivers may rise with meltwater, roads may turn into deep mud. The journey continues, changing its method of resistance. Specialists have not reached complete agreement on how emigrants themselves understood seasonal survival. Some writings frame endurance as faith and providence. Others emphasize preparation, cooperation, or luck. Many accounts combine all three. Perhaps because no single explanation feels large enough after a family has survived conditions that could easily have ended differently. You look back along the road. The wagon tracks form two dark lines through the snow, bending out of sight between the trees. Somewhere behind them lies the abandoned chair, the frozen river, the storm camp, and countless small places where your family stopped long enough to eat, mend, argue, sleep, and begin again. Nothing about the wagon seems romantic now. Its canvas is stained, its boards are scratched, its wheels carry frozen mud. The inside smells of smoke, wool, onions, medicine, and people who have lived too close together for too long. Yet it has held, not perfectly, not warmly, not comfortably. It has held enough. The afternoon road slopes gently downward. Meltwater glitters beside the wheel marks. Birds call from the trees, their notes small and clear after the silence of snow. The children begin another walking song. The words are different from yesterday, but the tune is familiar. The older girl carries the baby beneath her shawl. The recovering boy walks for a few minutes, then returns to the wagon before tiring. The mother checks him, adjusts the blankets, and continues beside the wheel. The father rests one hand against the wagon side as he walks. You do the same. The wood feels cold beneath your palm, but no longer frozen like stone. And now the road stretches forward beneath a widening sky. Your steps become slower, the sounds soften, the creak of the wheels settles into a steady rhythm, rising and falling like a quiet breath. The animals move without hurry, their hooves press into damp earth, and the wagon follows with a low wooden murmur. You no longer need to watch every shadow. The storm has passed behind you. The fire will be lit again tonight, but not yet. For now, light rests on the canvas, water runs beneath thinning snow. Somewhere beyond the next rise, grass waits under the white surface, patient and unseen. You breathe in slowly. The air smells of wet wood, cold soil, and the faint promise of spring. Your shoulders loosen, your hands rest. The family continues around you, quieter now, each person carried by the same gentle movement. The wheels turn, the road opens. The pale sky deepens toward evening, and the last sunlight stretches across the snow in long golden bands. You can let the distance fade, you can let the cold fade, you can leave the buckets, blankets, ropes, and heavy wheels beside the road. The wagon moves onward without asking anything more of you. Its canvas glows softly in the final light. The animals breathe. The children grow quiet. And as the trail bends among the trees, every sound becomes softer, farther away, until only the slow creak of wood remains, calm and steady, carrying you gently into sleep, sweet dreams.